from Donovan Sweeney. Just a little background before I turn it over to Jeff for the Planning Board in the Open Space Commission. Donovan Sweeney has been helping us for the better part of well over a year at this point to get to this point. They have been operating under the sole direction to site a proposed public safety facility on the St. Mark's Golf Course. The way that Jeff typically runs his show as he goes through the slides is he will do a quick refresh of where we have looked on the site to date and where we have landed at the, basically the committee's direction on where to site it. He will then pause at the end and we'll open it up to questions both in the committee on where we stand, any questions from this committee, but we'll also open it to the committees and commissions that have joined us tonight. I do want to reiterate that some of the information that Jeff will be showing tonight is new to all of us as well. So I will give this committee a chance to ask questions and then we'll turn it over to the other boards and commissions joining us tonight. That'll turn over to Jeff.
Thank you. Okay, as was stated, I'm just going to run through hopefully a brief overview of how far things have come up to the present day. So when we started this process, we, as Jason said, we are looking at the golf course site to house the public safety facility, which had been previously determined under a space needs study for roughly 36,000 square feet. So we're trying to find a space for this building and its associated parking and circulation needs on the golf course property. The first graphic is taken from the town GIS information. It shows the golf course site. On the left of the image is Corderville Road. On the right is Lattisquama. At the top of the image is the Woodward School, and roughly in the center is the existing golf club clubhouse. The first option that was conceptually looked at was to site a building along Corderville Road in the left-hand side there, roughly in front of a mass of existing trees. I should note that the hatched area, the diagonal hatch area, is at the time what was considered to be the wetlands zone with its buffer and no build area. This approach led to a building that was fairly long and linear with parking in the gray, as shown in gray, kind of on either ends, and the apparatus bay with its drive out, the back apparatus doors to the back side of the site. Is a more detailed view of it. Another option that was looked at was the similar location, I should say, with a two-story building. Prior one was one story, which would essentially shorten the building, both of which sort of had similar issues. One of them was that the building was really crushed up against Corderville Road, and the access to the road and vehicle access to the building was going to be problematic. We also felt that there would be much larger issues building within setbacks of the wetlands area and topography of the site. That's sort of a wet, low area of the site that would be essentially costly to build there for that reason. This is just a detailed view of it. A one-story building, this was a diagram to show how spread out a one-story building might get and how problematic it might be to work within that type of a building. And this was the two-story building showing how much program would have to be on the second floor. Third option that was reviewed was to put the building where the site of the existing golf clubhouse is, and that took, at this form at least, an L-shaped form with parking surrounding it and access out to Corderville Road. At the time, the committee debated these options, positives and negatives, and I think after this directed us to focus on this particular location. This is a more detailed view of it. So in our next meeting, we looked at a more detailed design, focusing on this particular location, and we had a couple of options to review, both in its parking and vehicle circulation, as well as in the configuration of the building. In the first case, was considering using potential land from the Choate Field for one of the drive access aisles. And this option, swinging the apparatus bay to the back side of the site and leaving the main part of the building facing Corderville Road. And then another option, basically flipping it from the beginning, was still with a bar, but leaving the apparatus facing the street. In all of these options, you'll note that the existing septic system that the school is tied into, as well as the clubhouse for the golf course, is in the center of the site, and for the most part is being built on by this new proposed building location, in which case we would need a new septic field to handle the new public safety building combined with the Woodward School, and all of those have been located here. In addition, in all of these options, we were showing screening comprised of vegetation, trees, plantings, as well as landscape berms to extend the existing trees to screen the building from the Lattisquama neighborhood. After that meeting, one particular design was chosen to be pursued at length, and we did that. This one, I won't get into the details, but essentially continues to describe a more detailed look at that site configuration. At this point, we started getting into the interior layout of the building, and this will show in the next few slides how the building has changed. This is one layout for essentially an L-shaped or a T-shaped form. We also looked at this, how it laid out on site. And then we looked at a bar shape, how the program laid out internally within the building and also on site. And then also what we call the square form, again, inside the building and on site. And this was done primarily to try to start aligning the program square footage that was voted on by the committee with the actual design square footage of the building once we start laying it out, try to get those to be as close as possible and potentially even be more efficient than what was originally programmed. Subsequently, the committee chose to proceed with the square-shaped form, and this is the site plan that resulted from that, and we've been continuing to work on this form. The plan was developed to a more detailed level, showing furniture, doors, walls, corridors, all the things they would need to describe the actual layout of the station, both first and second floor. And subsequently from this meeting, we were then able to get some further feedback and show you what we've brought today. Should also mention at the prior meeting, budget was discussed as well, and some of the changes that were made were in reaction to the budget and trying to tighten up the building, make it as efficient as possible, and hopefully that would also make the budget as efficient as possible. So I'll slow down a little bit. Now we're into new work that we'd like to discuss this evening. This is the new site plan, and a couple of things I want to point out. First of which, we at the last meeting discussed access to Corderville Road and the possibility that had been studied in the prior schemes of going over the existing wetlands or stream that ran to the existing culvert. And it was the decision of the committee to look at options that did not do that, that used a separate emergency access driveway that tried to skirt the edge of the Choate Field so that we wouldn't have to essentially spend money on building a new culvert. So that's what's shown here. There's two access drives, a public drive and emergency access drive for primarily fire department, but also police. Public drive leads to a visitor parking. Just about the bend where the visitor parking is, we have included an access point for trails or some sort of recreational use, potentially for further development of the town, of developing recreational area, so that visitor parking of the police station could be used for parking for those facilities. Swinging around the back of the building, you'll note that opposed to the prior plans, we've now pulled the building away from the edge of that wooded area. And by doing that, we're coming down the hill a little bit more and tightening up the amount of paved area on site. So we have even less paved area on site than we had before, which means less drainage and less asphalt that we have to buy. Still meets all of the parking requirements for the building. We have tightened up the plantings around this new site plan area, so that it's still being screened from the neighborhood and the berms and such that we had previously done. The building shape itself has changed a little bit, and I'll get into that when we look at the plan. But we still have rear access to the fire department, apparatus bays, and essentially a ring of circulation around the building. This is the first floor plan. I think the color is pretty self-explanatory, but red is fire, blue is police, green is shared or public space. I'm not going to walk through every single space, but suffice it to say we were able to trim several thousand square feet of about 1,000 or so square feet out of the building. That will show up in the budget. Part of that square footage came from discussion that we had with the fire chief, and that was about the apparatus bay. You'll note on the left-hand side that there is a portion of the bays that are now been removed. At the time Chief and I talked about it, he was willing to do this because these represented vehicles that the town does not own currently. They're planned for the future. This was essentially what the station is designed for, is to hold the capacity for future, looking into the future build out of the town. But he felt comfortable that one possibility would be to build the building without these two pieces being enclosed, and then in the future, if the town did purchase them, to do something, either build out the garage or build a canopy or something like that over those vehicles. So that was something that was removed. Everything else in the building remains as originally programmed, but we did tighten it up. We took out extra space from as many areas as we could find inside the building, so it's as tight, I think, as we can have it at this point without eliminating additional program. I'll point out some of the major features for those that aren't familiar with it. You enter the building from the vestibule at the bottom of the screen. You enter up into the lobby. There's a public conference room, small conference room for having small conversations with the police department or filling out forms. The fire department administration area is immediately on your left. The dispatch room is to the front, standing in front of you with the dispatch positions, and then an elevator and a stair up to the second floor, which is the police department administration area and fire department living quarters. Around the corridor to the right, there's public toilets, as well as the public meeting room and training room for the departments. Back on the back right corner of the building is the fire department, police department patrol spaces. Generally patrol officers area, as well as detention, evidence, and dead records. Going beyond the fire administration space on the left, you'll find the apparatus bay, as well as all the apparatus storage for bunker gear, equipment, and report writing, and other various fire department spaces. The second floor is smaller because there's a lot less that has to go up here, but the two primary things are the fire department living spaces, as well as the police department administration, including the detectives and patrol locker rooms. The fitness room is in the middle of the building, separating the two departments. Big feature of these plans is that there's a clear delineation between the two departments, so that there's no main reason for the two departments to have to go into the other space, which maintains a very secure environment. As I pointed out, there are some shared spaces, but they all exist in that media point where the two come together. That is the new layout of the plan. It's been, I think, sent to the chiefs. They both have seen it, I believe, and are okay with it at this point. This is the roof plan, and these are some of the images. Same images we showed last week, because the building, for the most part, is still the same in terms of its look. So this shows a look that has gabled roofs with some dormers, with generally a flat roof over the fire apparatus area, and a little training stair in the back with a little gabled roof over that. And then a view from further down Corderville Road as you approach it from the south, showing across the existing golf course area to the building up on the hill. You can now see the wing of the patrol space, the single-story wing that projects out to the right there, and then the parking areas that surround the building. So that's where we are today, and I'm going to slip back into the site plan so that you guys can ask questions and we can proceed with the rest of your agenda.
Does anyone on the committee have any questions for Jeff? Al? Just remember to turn your mic on.
I've got 3 or 4 questions. Is that better? Thank you. The sergeant's gear and roll call area is effectively a shed on the side of the building. That's an awful lot of roof and skin for a relatively modest area. It seems to me that is very, very inefficient, and given that my understanding is we still have a budget problem, could that be moved to the 2nd floor so that we could have a more efficient building in terms of sort of the skin to usable space ratio?
Yeah. We looked at the entire 1st floor to see what areas that could be moved to the 2nd floor. To meet the department's needs, there wasn't any real particular space that could be moved up there, apart from a couple of file rooms that there's possibility, like the dead record space, although that adds additional cost to the structure to support it. But in terms of your particular question, in terms of the sergeants and roll call, the patrol spaces, they really need to be where the main patrol area is in the building, around where all the other patrol officers are entering. They manage the station day to day. They need to be close to the dispatch room as well as the booking area. And it's important for them to be on that main level to handle the day-to-day operations of the police station. Essentially, that's what happens. I'd welcome the chief if he wants to add any more to that.
Perfect response.
Okay.
It's a very, very expensive way to provide that capability. I'm disappointed. Do you have an updated cost?
I defer to the chair.
I think we should do because we're in joint session with other committees, I think we should defer the cost discussion to the end. But if you have a question on how any of these spaces relate into the cost.
Well, my question is, I'm not going to wait until the end. Do we have an updated cost? We need to not hide this stuff.
Yes, there's an updated budget, and I'll defer to the chair as to when he wants to present that.
In my opinion, have you taken a look at some of the discussion that's happened in terms of modifying the design so that it works better with maintaining the golf course as a golf course? I know some information has been provided to you.
We did receive some information pretty late last week, and we took a look at it. There's certainly significant changes that would be needed in terms of at least the one that I saw last week, in terms of how the building would, essentially it's changing the building design and its location on the site. We did not have enough time to prepare any sort of study of that option. All I can say is I saw it, and there would be some changes to this design that would be needed.
Okay. In my opinion, if we're looking for the votes at town meeting, adapting this design and that is the formal opinion, I think, of this committee, adapting this design so that it works in concert with maintaining a viable golf course is critical to securing the funding, and there's no sense designing a building unless we're serious about securing the funding. Those are my questions.
So I think Mr. Perry and his team are going to present and get Jeff's feedback once we get the input from the other boards and commissions. Any other Public Safety Committee members have questions for Jeff? Any members of the Planning or Open Space? I'll probably use that mic just so Jeff can stay where he's at, if you don't mind.
I'm Freddie Gillespie, and I'm a member of the Open Space Preservation Commission. We have a quorum here tonight. Our chair asked me to read this letter to you. She can't be here because she's at a CPR meeting. So this was written to the St. Mark's Golf Course Master Plan Committee, January 18th. Says the Open Space Preservation Commission, OSPC, met on January 3rd, 2017, and reviewed the Selectmen's proposal for the St. Mark's Golf Course. The OSPC offers the following comments and observations. The OSPC voted unanimously to recommend that the entire property be kept as open space with a conservation restriction to permanently protect the numerous open space values of the property, including wildlife habitat, scenic views, historic landscape, passive recreation, and a well-loved golf course. The OSPC also noted that our chair, Lisa Braccio, is the vice chair of the St. Mark's Golf Course Master Plan Committee, and that we believe the charge of that committee was restricted to determine what the remainder of the property should best be used for beyond the building of the public safety buildings. For the purpose of that committee's charge, and in the event the public safety buildings are built on the golf course, we recommend that the remainder of the property be placed in a conservation restriction to permanently protect the remaining land for open space. However, taking out even 5 to 10 acres of land greatly diminishes the open space value of the property well beyond the proportionate value of those acres. While we do support our police and fire departments and their need for upgraded facilities, we believe the town buildings' needs can be built elsewhere, and that the loss of this historic property would forever change the character of our town. Once it's gone forever. Therefore, we believe that the entire property should be preserved, and to support that recommendation, we offer the following facts. Wildlife habitat. St. Mark's Golf Course is the #1 property for wildlife habitat in the town. To help with the land protection strategy, Massachusetts Audubon Society was hired to prepare a study for the Community Preservation Committee to help determine best sites for CPA funding for open space acquisition, resulting in the 2007 report, Priority Sites for Wildlife Habitat Protection in Southborough, Massachusetts. To prepare the report, Mass Audubon ran Mass GIS analysis on all undeveloped or underdeveloped property in town, which were then scored for wildlife habitat values. The standalone report, also included in the 2009 Open Space and Recreation Plan, found over 100 properties that ranked high enough to be included in the plan. St. Mark's Golf Course came in at #4. However, since 2007, the 3 higher-ranking properties are all in various stages of being developed, so that the golf course becomes the #1 unprotected wildlife habitat priority in Southborough. Long-standing town priority for protection for over 35 years. Open space and recreation plans are a requirement for receiving state grants for open space and recreation projects. Once created, the plans are submitted to the Board of Selectmen, approved, and then sent to the state for their approval. A requirement of the town's open space recreation plan is to prioritize parcels for the town to protect. We are currently updating the plan, and St. Mark's Golf Course is listed as a priority for protection in our draft 2006-2017 plan. But more importantly, for over 35 years, St. Mark's Golf Course has been listed as a priority for protection in our Board of Selectmen's approved plans. The Open Space and Recreation Plan references to St. Mark's Golf Course. The Town of Southborough Open Space and Recreation Plan 1981. These are quotes. St. Mark's Golf Course, #1 priority for protection. Rated high for protection of groundwater, water resources, and prime agricultural soil, as well as scenic and recreation opportunities. Quote, this is the most desirable piece of open space in Southborough. Should the present institutional owners decide to sell, we feel that direct acquisition would preserve the present use, making a needed recreation facility available to the public. The golf course could either be operated by the town or leased to a private owner. The Town of Southborough Open Space and Recreation Plan 1988. St. Mark's Golf Course. This is the only sizable parcel still near the town center. Development would change the town's character. It is visible from several roads, located atop a high groundwater favorably area, and has prime agricultural soils. Top priority. Town of Southborough Open Space and Recreation Plan 1999. St. Mark's School owns some of the most visually important areas of town. St. Mark's School Field and golf courses are open green space that contribute greatly to the visual character of the town center. Listed in the 1999 Open Space and Recreation Plan as an important unprotected parcel. Not only is preserving St. Mark's Golf Course important because of its beautiful viewscapes, rich history, recreational opportunities, but also offers critical protection to the reservoir groundwater and prime agricultural soil. We have Southborough citizens' documented commitment to protect our open space. In survey after survey in our open space and recreation plans and in our master plans, the citizens of Southborough voiced their desire to protect open space. In 1990, the citizens of Southborough went even further and voted to tell our selectmen to, quote, pursue the acquisition of open space. 1990 town meeting, Article 30, the town votes to adopt the following open space policy. Quote, we, the citizens of Southborough, value open space as an asset vital to our town. We choose to exercise our right to help make decisions relating to the use of our land. We ask town boards to use their full authority to protect the town's traditional landscape and mix of land uses. As we grow, town planners must keep preservation of woodlands and fields as a high priority and negotiate with developers accordingly. Public notification should be made of any and all lands offered to the town, and town officials are encouraged to pursue the acquisition of acceptable land. Wetlands, ponds, and reservoirs must be given the fullest benefit of laws respecting them, and any additional regulation should be passed as needed. This is our commitment to the preservation and conservation of Southborough's open space resources. The current proposal for St. Mark's Golf Course does not meet the standard of this approved town meeting policy. The selectmen did not give public notice of the land offered to the town until after they made a deal to develop a significant portion of the property. Furthermore, the current charge to the St. Mark's Golf Course Master Plan Committee to see what other buildings are suited for the land is in conflict with this town policy. In closing, we restate our opinion that the entire property should be protected as a critical resource to our town for today and future generations. Respectfully submitted, Lisa Braccio, Southborough Open Space Preservation Commission Chair. And just to restate that we value the work you're doing, we just believe it needs to be on a different parcel. We're, 5 weeks away from special town meeting to approve the purchase of this land that requires a building to go there, and it was never vetted. You know, there was no discussion with the Open Space Commission on what the value of that land and what our opinion would be to having buildings put on it, never mind the additional buildings. And we also did not feel that putting that building there and ensuring that, I know I'm hearing that the citizens petition to put a golf course on the rest of the property is being discussed tonight. You know, the value of that land is not in just the golf course. That helps manage and protect the scenic views, the historic landscape, but just building it out and having a golf course there is not satisfying the needs of what has been in our open space and recreation plans as a highest priority for over 35 years. And it's, to me personally, a little amazing that we're at this point right now without that ever being discussed. 35 years. It's been the town's highest priority for open space protection.
So I guess I wouldn't, a couple questions from me, and then I'll just open it up to the rest of the committee, is, two things that I'd like to point out. Number one, has your commission studied our site plan options that we spent about 2 years looking at, and can you recommend an alternative location for a 35,000 square foot facility?
We're the Open Space Preservation Commission. We believe that if this had not been brought to the Public Safety Committee, you would have found a satisfying option of where to build. There was a recent comment by Al Hamilton in My Southborough where it said you have other options. We know that you had a plan before the golf course was brought to you, that when the golf course proposal was brought to this committee, that all of a sudden, you had been meeting regularly, and then I think there were like 3 meetings in 2016 that were posted. I may be mistaken, but that's what I saw. It seems not our fault that you were offered the highest priority for protection in the town as a building site, that it's not our purview to go and find where your needs need to be met. We believe you can find them. We believe you were on that road before this was brought to you, and that if this hadn't been brought to you, you would have found a solution.
So I think a key point to point out for everyone else in the room is that a key part of how we landed at the St. Mark's Golf Course as a potential site for a public safety facility was the Board of Selectmen approached St. Mark's about acquiring approximately 1 acre to the west of the current fire and police station, and that was not for sale, and this was the offer that was made. The counter offer, obviously there's a lot more to it than just a simple land swap. I also want to point out, because this committee was invited to executive sessions with the Board of Selectmen, but I believe your committee was also present in some of those discussions.
Absolutely not. I was invited as the chair of the CPC. It was executive session. I had no ability to go back and get input from any other committee I was on. And it wasn't the Open Space Preservation Commission, and I was there as the chair of the Community Preservation Committee asking how much money we had available. And so we were never asked. And what I'm saying is, when that counter offer was made, that would have been a time to vet where people stood on it, and whether there were other options to renegotiate. That's what we weren't in the room. I don't know. It seems that another offer was made and it was accepted. I mean, I'm not one to say what the town can and can't do, but I know there's eminent domain, there's other ways of, if you have to have the land, and that's the only place to put it, you don't necessarily destroy the most important open space parcel in the town forevermore that will change the character of the town. Forever.
Any other committee members have questions? Go ahead.
We have made a fairly extensive study of available sites. The locus of the study, given the building of a public safety building as opposed to 2 separate buildings, really has to be centered between essentially where the station is now and a few hundred yards south of the transfer station along 85. The key piece of real estate being the 85-9 overpass, because it's the only non-grade crossing of Route 9, which means it's the only place where a piece of emergency apparatus doesn't have to go through a stoplight. When you study essentially all of the sites there, you realize that you don't have a lot of choices. The transfer station site does not work for a variety of technical reasons. It would be tremendously expensive to build a public safety facility there. We looked at the existing site, and we did approach St. Mark's. That was our recommendation, specifically because we didn't want to touch the golf course either. We looked at it a little differently. We didn't really want the opposition of the golfers to the program, but we didn't want to touch that site. And when St. Mark's came back and said not for sale, yes, we can go and by eminent domain take what's called the sustainable meadow. It will be a lengthy and expensive and unpleasant process. Many of us who believe in property rights find the concept of eminent domain to be an odious one, essentially saying, I am going to take your property whether you like it or not. Some of us don't like that. St. Mark's came back and offered us the golf course for the purpose. The reason they came back and offered us the golf course was so that we could build a public safety facility on it. If you take the golf course and the meadow, and you want to build a public safety facility, those are probably, absent significant takings, the only 2 potential sites. We looked at the senior center, too small. We looked at the town forest outside of the required service area. We looked at the transfer station. We looked at the Middle Road site in conjunction with the transfer station. The Middle Road site is inappropriate. The transfer station would require significant wetlands crossings and building a bridge over a public drinking water supply. You can imagine what that's going to cost us, and the pain and the delay. We, so we have essentially looked at all of those. Now, there are options. If for some reason this does not go forward, then it is likely that, and this is now only Al Hamilton speaking, it is likely that we will build a police station sooner rather than later, because we really have to, and that we would deal with the fire department's needs sequentially. That will be more expensive. It is on the order of $2 million more expensive. It does get sequenced over time, so you pay for it over a little longer period of time. So there are options. They aren't, but we believe that this is the most cost-effective way to proceed. I've got issues with the existing design, but if we're going to build a public safety building, there are really only two places in town we can build it without taking and knocking down, some commercial buildings, which, by the way, pay plenty of taxes, which we need. So those are our choices. So, I think it's irresponsible to say it can be, people are saying, put it elsewhere. We've spent 2 years studying the elsewhere.
I think it's irresponsible not to have talked to the Open Space Commission about the plans to permanently, forevermore, change the character and the look and feel of the most important documented 35 years open space parcel, and to say we're irresponsible. That's what this problem of this whole process is. It's pitting really well-intentioned, great needs of the town against each other. We're not being irresponsible for looking through our records, saying this was documented for over 35 years in numerous report after report as being the highest priority, and here's a plan without any communication with the commission or the open space land trust in town. There's a large population in town that care about their open spaces, and to come out with a plan that's a done deal, that this is going to be forever changed without having those conversations, it seems a little unfair to say that we're unreasonable or not being upfront. It's not, and I would say back against about the St. Mark's, I wasn't saying, and I'm sorry that I said the words eminent domain. It had been discussed in a prior letter I'd read from your committee. It's certainly not something I'm saying go out and do it, but we don't know what happened in those negotiations, how hard they pushed to get the land, because it would seem that maybe someone thought, wow, the golf course, great solution, let's just go there. We're asking for renegotiation, reconsideration. This is for, a building that forever, hundreds and hundreds of years down the road, this will change the landscape of the town. Buildings come and go. What's it, a 40-year lifespan you're looking at? You're not going to get this land back once you change it. And the other thing, which is not your issue so much because you're just looking at the public safety, but this was presented as a building site for all municipal needs. And that's not, your fault, but, we're looking at what other buildings can go there and not how much of the land should be, originally there's a document that says 50% undeveloped. Just want everyone to be aware that does not mean 50% open space. It does not mean a chunk of land. You can totally build that property out and still meet the requirement to be 50% undeveloped. Every blade of grass, every little green shrub you show there counts towards it. You can have a speck over here, the septic system there, the wetlands here, setbacks from the road, the reservoir, and totally build out the interior and all around and still meet that requirement. So there is no open space component of anything that's being proposed at town meeting, and you can't tie it to it at this late date.
Go ahead, Pete.
Is there any place on the site that we could put it that would be less of an impact for the wildlife or the habitats that you speak of?
We didn't look at it that way because it's the entire property. You have a historic landscape, which in itself has great value. The value of driving up 85, it's the gateway to the town. This will forever impact the view of the rural cemetery, to the golf course.
We're very familiar with the site. I mean, lived in the town over 20 years. Very familiar what you're talking about. I'm just curious if we could move this in a more advantageous place that would save wildlife. I mean, obviously, we want to do that. We want to try and meet everybody's needs, you know, the neighbors, you know, we want it as much as we can. It's unfortunate that it's a 60-acre site and we're looking for, 4 or 5 acres. Personally, I didn't think that was, you know, overtaking anything. It still leaves a large amount of that site undeveloped.
Not under the current proposal.
Well, I think it does. I mean, I can speak for myself.
There is no
Certainly, we didn't
proposal.
go in and make the biggest building and the most asphalt and the biggest impact. That we tried not to do that. We tried to be as minimal as we could, given the cards that we were dealt. Unfortunately, you weren't invited to the meetings that you speak of. I saw you at a couple meetings, but I didn't know what you represented. I thought you represented that group, but, you know, that's just me.
Let's be clear, when you're at an executive session, it's not your commission doing dialogue.
Right.
I never discussed it with the Open Space Commission because that was, or the Community Preservation Committee, because it was an executive session.
Right. Well, I didn't know what your invitation was. I knew you were there. I
Any
knew you
invitation to an executive session comes with the restraint that the people in the room are the people that know. And, you know, you're breaking it if you go and talk to your committee. I mean, that's my understanding.
Yep.
So, our commission was never included in those conversations, and also what had been originally presented was greatly changed. It was 5 to 7 acres, and the rest protected open space. There is no protection.
As far as the view goes, is there any other place we could put it that would be less of an impact on this view you speak of?
Well, yeah, above Lattisquama.
Off of Lim Squaw?
I mean, I don't know. I don't think there's an acceptable place. I think you're going to see it, and you're going to have, that's not going to solve the neighborhood, and I think it would impact in the distance. I'm not suggesting that.
Well, we're just.
And then where are you going to drive?
There's something we maybe missed, you know, I mean, is there something that maybe we missed? Because, you know, I want something to come up at town meeting, and say, what about this?
I would never say, you're saying the view in that area, but there's other implications for any other location. And it's a tough site to build. I'm not even sure, I mean, is that 200 feet away from the stream? Have you designated the stream as perennial or intermittent? I mean,
That's what we hired the consultant for, to make sure that we were speaking with some expertise.
because
And
that
we
could
didn't
tie
want
you up.
just, you know, a bunch of lay people say, put it here, and then turns out we couldn't put it there. We wanted to make sure that the citizens had the facts.
I don't know if it's 200 feet away, but I'm saying if it's not, you could be tied up in court for years. Someone can appeal
Do you
that.
want to comment on that?
We reviewed this with town staff, including conservation, planning, and Board of Health, Building Department, and got all of their feedback on things like setback and other issues that they may see, including septic field, things like that. We believe the way the plan is currently shown, we're in the most advantageous position the building can be. The 200-foot areas that need to be shown from the building are met. There's a 100-foot buffer line shown on the plans, and the plan has been changed to not put in a new culvert, new overpass on the existing stream. We're putting it in north of that, so we're not even building a new culvert, which we were in the past when we did meet with these boards or staff members. So we feel like this solution, as it currently stands, is the most advantageous for the building.
I was just bringing up the question that if it's a perennial stream, it's a 200-foot no-touch. Not the building, but no touch, right? So you're 200 feet away from the stream, just in case it is a perennial?
The building is currently 200 feet.
Pavement?
We don't have, I think, do we have a final, do you have a final declaration of what that stream was? I don't think we have the final determination on the stream yet, but I believe, I don't believe it was a perennial stream in our conversations, but we don't actually have the final determination, I think, on that.
I think it's important to note that this is a schematic design. Should the town opt to purchase the land, and then the next warrant article would be for the construction of this facility, there would be a significant amount of engineering and architectural work that would have to go in to it. And I think anyone that looks at this diagram now, and there will continue to be refinements, I know there's members of the committee that continue to propose changes, is the building could turn to accommodate, these sorts of items that come up as more investigation and more work is done on them. But I think it is a point worth noting and looking into.
I guess my point was just, you're saying where else could, would be better. I don't think you have another location. You have wetland crossings that are important to consider. What I'm suggesting is, if that's a perennial stream, where you're showing all the driveways and parking lots, if they're in the 200-foot buffer, that could make you have to move all of that, not just tilting the building, and it could mean relocating the building. And I think that's the sort of thing town meeting would want to know ahead of time. And you're talking about, well, where else could we put it? There's not another location on the property that's better. And I shouldn't even be talking about this because I'm speaking as one member of the commission, because our vote was preserve the whole thing. And we said if the town meeting did approve the purchase, then the rest of it should be in a conservation restriction, permanently protecting it. But that was not our recommendation.
Okay. One more question, and then we'll see if planning has any questions.
The area next to the current fire station, that Sustainable Meadow, sometimes it's referred to, is that, can you rate the relevance of that as far as open space goes, or habitats, or like, is that less important or more important, or, because people, I think if we went that way, they would probably complain about the view and, the scenic view from the end to the center of town. Just trying to feel where's that kind of, as far as open space goes,
Our commission
Are they
didn't
the
discuss
same, or-
that, so I wouldn't weigh in on it. I do know for a fact that it didn't rank as high on the Mass Audubon survey. It's not the #1 top priority for wild. And when I talk about wildlife habitat protection, when you change the size of the property, you change the value. And it's not like take 5 acres out, 10% of the land, it goes down by 10%. There's other considerations. And for that property, particularly where the viewscape is, that's a huge historic landscape that is, in addition to the wildlife habitat, a huge reason, saying huge, it's one of the highest ranking reasons for that property to be protected forever. It's symbolic to the town's heritage, and for that reason. And I just want to say something. I was not in any way suggesting that you put the fire station over La Squama. That was a knee-jerk reaction to that view right there. There's many other reasons why putting it up towards La Squama wouldn't work, and it still has the same negative impact on the passive recreation, and wildlife habitat is putting it where it is.
Yeah, I would hope that the Lotusquama Road residents in the neighborhood can attest that this committee has worked tirelessly with them to make sure that this proposed facility had the least impact on them as practical. A lot of them have attended our meetings, which is really what resulted in why the facility is cited. It's one of the primary reasons why it's cited where it is, due to the grade, et cetera. And I do want to reiterate something that Mr. Hamilton said. We're talking about a public safety facility. It has to be in the center of the town. We cannot favor one neighborhood over another. We are dealing with some slight differences of response times with them being on now the south side of Route 30 as opposed to the north side. It's only 1 minute, but we can't start to adjust and go further outside of that zone. So I really do think that anyone that is considering this really needs to take a step back and come up with a solution as opposed to identifying issues, because we're putting potentially public safety at risk if we start to move this facility around outside of the zone that this committee has been working on for the greater part of 2 years.
I think it's, again, unfortunate that this conversation is happening 5 weeks before town meeting to purchase the whole property, and that this is the first time you've heard the Open Space Commission's opinion. And there's certainly boards that have never asked for it that are involved with this, so. Again, we have a responsibility to the open space that's our charge. Facilitate the preservation of open space in the town of Southborough.
In our charge is from the Board of Selectmen as well, in terms of.
Ours is from town meeting.
Yeah, but ours is from the Board of Selectmen, and we were given a site to work with that we've been able to work with. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. So before I just check with.
So just to be clear, though, our comments and statement is not against the Public Safety Committee here. It's not. Personally, I want to say I admire the work you've done. I think you've been put in a hard place, as we have, and I'm very saddened that it feels like our very good public goals for the community are being put at really odds. And I think earlier in the process, maybe some of this could have been better handled.
Thank you for your feedback.
I just want to say, our biggest priority when we started looking at this property was keeping the visual impact to the Lattisquama residents to a minimum and trying to maintain the visual corridor from 85. Just because I don't see a bunch of buildings going up in the next 50 years, because everybody in this room knows Southborough does nothing quickly. We worked really hard, and we'll continue to work hard to make it a win-win for everybody. We'll listen to any direction you want to point us in and see if we can make it work. We want this building done. It needs to be done. And that's my only statement for the night.
Thank you. I just did want to point out one thing is we held a public information session last Thursday night. And Mr. Rooney, who was involved from the Board of Selectmen with the negotiations, I thought did a tremendous job outlining what the deal was and how the negotiations came about. Without putting him on the spot in the room now, what I would like to do is maybe reference any of you that have any questions on how the negotiations went down to look at that video when it does get posted to Southborough Access Media and direct any questions to the Board of Selectmen, because I think they're willing, and I don't want to speak for them, but I think they're willing to answer questions on how this went down, because I think we're all working towards a common goal here as a town. So with that, I'll see if the Planning Board has any questions, comments, concerns that they'd like to share with us.
Good evening. Mimi Luttrell. First, I'd like to thank you all for your tireless hard work. It's much appreciated. I'm a member of the Planning Board. The Planning Board is posted tonight, and we have not discussed this project as a board, so we're here mostly to learn. But I, as a member, have a couple of questions. To understand the switch from the current location to the golf course, I know there was a feasibility study done that recommended the current site with a 70 feet of property from St. Mark's, equaling about an acre. And then after that feasibility study came out, this committee recommended directing the selectmen to take by eminent domain in your minutes.
Yeah.
But it wasn't 1 acre, it was from the corner of the current site all the way to Route 30. So why did we go from 1 acre to the whole meadow?
So those minutes were from when we were meeting in executive session, when we were having executive session meetings with the Board of Selectmen as well, and were privy to some of the details before the negotiations were made public. And the view of the committee, and certainly anyone can chime in if I misstate anything here, was we were getting a little anxious that the deal was not occurring. And the reason that we recommended that larger swath of land is we have a option called option 6, which was on the original site with this, expanding greatly into the meadow. What that does would have brought the entire station down to Route 30. What it would have allowed us to do is maintain operations in the current facility, as opposed to having to relocate the fire department for 12 to 18 months at a significant cost. So when we weren't getting traction on the 70 feet, which yielded an acre, we, knowing that the eminent domain proceedings would certainly be costly, recommended, going for a greater swath of land and seeing where it came out.
Yeah, I was chair at the time, and we were putting pressure on both the Board of Selectmen and St. Mark's, to be blunt. And that was the 6-pound hammer we were using.
Okay. Are the negotiations with St. Mark's still ongoing?
I'll defer to the Board of Selectmen, but I will rehash what they said the other night, in that there is a ongoing negotiation of the terms of the purchase and sale, but there was a press release issued a couple months ago that had the key terms to the deal, which my understanding is those are not changing.
Okay.
And one more thing, they did say that they were planning to publish the purchase and sale in advance of town meeting.
So my last question, relating to the St. Mark's site, so there isn't a great comfort level that where the schematic is showing that that's where the building will actually end up going? It could be in the middle of the site somewhere that would not allow
No.
the golf course to continue.
I think this is the general area that it's going to go. I think there are certainly other citizen petition warrant articles on town meeting floor, and what this committee has voted to do is, if the will of town meeting, supported preserving certain sections of the remainder of the golf course, either as a golf course, as an open space, we are certainly willing to have discussions with whoever our consultants may be, to find a way to meet the needs and demands of town meeting and the vote there, without sacrifice, as long as it doesn't sacrifice the functional requirements of the facility.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There any final comments from open space or planning? Go ahead. Yeah, please.
Hi, Connell McNamara, member of Open Space Preservation Commission, 5 Newton. Just want to start by saying that, and this might rub some people on my commission the wrong way, but I'm not a tree hugger by any stretch of the imagination. I just see this from a pure business perspective. The most valuable asset this town has is its open space. I can imagine you can understand that, and that it provides flexibility for things like you guys are looking for and looking to do, in addition to what our commission and our group appreciates the most about it, which is the fact that it provides open land and multiple conservation benefits as well. Looking at it from that perspective, I just want to reiterate something that Freddie had said, and that is that our commission had voted to, or not had not voted, but had, well, we did vote, but to write that letter stating our position to maintain the entire golf course as open space. And I think there's been another citizens petition to look at renegotiating for the meadow. Now, I was not at the selectmen meeting that you referenced where they talked about the negotiations, so I don't know about how that all went down. But I think what Freddie was hinting at, and I can't speak for her, but what I would say for myself is that we would rather that the Board of Selectmen look at renegotiating for the meadow rather than continuing down this path of trying to develop this golf course as constituted, but also if you've been to any of the St. Mark's master plan committees, there's been talk of major recreation facilities. I've heard swimming pool thrown out there a few times. So all of those things make people who have been a part of the Open Space Preservation Commission very nervous because they've been working on this particular parcel for over 35 years. So not so much a question, just a comment for the record.
Thank you. Does this committee have any more questions or comments for planning or open space? All right, so before you officially adjourn your meetings, you may want to stay and Mr. Perry, who's a resident, has requested some time tonight to outline what he and his group of residents have been doing with regards to potentially saving the remainder of the golf course should we successfully vote to build a new public safety facility on it. So, Mr. Perry?
Thank you. David Parry, 22 Main Street. I need your help with this chip. I don't know how to do that. Can I just ask by saying, does anyone here not have the two handout sheets? Okay. Anyone else not have the two handout sheets?
I don't know which one is the one you want.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that. Can you bring up, just go through them.
I have a very low rate, so
Okay.
I'm sure you'll be able to.
Okay, not that one. Okay, that's the first one. Okay, by the way, now, okay, I'm working with a, I have to look up here, don't I? I have to sit down and I have to speak into the mic, yep. Excuse me. I'm working with John Wilson, the former moderator, and Richard Cruciani, who's at the back here, and a number of other people on a group we're calling the Save the Golf Course Working Group. It's just a sort of name. We're volunteers. We have no official status. We're just putting our own effort into this. The information I want to give you tonight is new information developed within the last week, last 5 days. So you don't really have it, and your consultants here don't have it at all. This is it's our first chance to really present this as a sort of working idea, and we want to sort of, as a workshop, get these ideas out to you. I wanted to start by saying, the Open Space Commission, I totally agree, is a vitally important group in town. I'm very sympathetic to what you guys are talking about, and we on our group totally agree that this golf course should not be treated as sort of a potential construction site for future other town facilities. I mean, we are absolutely on board with that. Our position is quite simple. We'll work with the selectmen and with the Public Safety Committee, but we are going to try and insist that a golf course be modified in a good way so that it remains as a good operating golf course. Not some funky golf course, but a good operating golf course. And there's a huge question mark around can that be done? And there are some serious consequences flowing from that idea. So that is our motivation, just to work with the selectmen, with you guys, and modify what you're doing so we can continue the golf course, and, a big and here, save all the remaining space. 93% of the entire golf course will be saved as open space with a conservation restriction. Not 50%, which is the deal with St. Mark's, but 93%. It's not 100%, which the Open Space Commission would like, and I guess lots of us would like, but it's 93%. It's a heck of a lot. And so the question is, can we minimize this? Can we minimize the visual impact of it and do it in such a way that the golf course can actually continue? And, cut a long story short, the answer is probably yes. I'll explain how. Oh, by the way, I should sort of back up and say we do also have a citizens petition warrant article at special town meeting, as this group does. Well, maybe Open Space does, but there is a citizens petition warrant article, isn't there? Another one. There are two, at least two. Our one states that we want a conservation restriction on everything south of the public safety facility, 93% of the land. I have copies of it here, if people want copies. Oh, by the way, before I do anything, I'm going to give you 7 copies down there. And just since we're here at a public meeting, I'm going to give you copies if you just pass those out. There's no hidden agenda here. I want it all out there. So it's a citizens petition article which will be voted on. So here's the first thing. John Wilson, golfing member, and among a lot of golfers, they're desperately keen on keeping the golf course. And so we were, the first word we got back from you guys, the Public Safety Committee, was, well, you can come off there with a gravel driveway into something else. And, so in the bubble diagram, P for parking, GC for golf club, 9G for the 9th green. Question mark. Can it fit there? This is kind of like you said, this is kind of like all we're thinking about. And the answer to that is categorically it's not workable. That is not workable. So the question is, how do we find out what is workable? So very fortunately, one of the company which leases the golf course now from St. Mark's School has a very good friend called Brian Silver, who is a world-famous golf course designer. He's a resident in Florida, but his father happens to live in town. So he was brought up in Southborough as a child. And he's volunteered. He flew up here at his own expense last Wednesday morning, simply to advise us on how and if this course could be modified so that it would still remain a good course at his expense. His name is Brian Silver. And let's go to the, how do you do this? Flip this thing to, no, not that one. Okay, that one. Okay, I know this is difficult to read. I apologize. Does someone have a red thing? Is that, how does it work? The red thing? Okay, there we are. Look, up on the top right there, Brian Silver, golf course design professional Brian Silver, site walk January 25th for St. Mark's Golf Course Working Group. So 9 o'clock last Wednesday morning, no one knows about this other than the sort of the master plan group, who that very night we presented this. And so, we came in the driveway. Where does this thing work? And we stood around here. That was the bubble diagram, right, which doesn't work. And John Wilson asked the guy, and Brian Silver said straight away, absolutely no way, that can't work. What can work is, I'm going to go through this systematically. I'm sorry, but it's important because they are the criteria you're going to have to follow if you want a workable golf course. And it's going to require your site plan to be modified, which I think can be done miraculously. That area there where the bubble was, which is supposed to contain parking and a golf club and a 9th green, can only be sited for a 9th green. Why is that? Because the ninth hole, in this expert's opinion, that's a very good site for a green for the ninth hole. It's a good distance, and it's kind of like an ideal location. He says, this is the place for the ninth green. And you'll see there number 9 and a dotted line. That's just a big zone within which you'd put the green, somewhere in that zone. But the critical criteria, you see there it says pin line, 9 pin line, 2 black dots. And the distance between that pin, sorry, my hand is very jerky here. It's hard to hold this thing still. I'm sorry. Anyway, the distance between that pin line and the nearest paving over there, that driveway, the nearest car, has to be an absolute minimum 175 feet, but preferably 200 feet. Otherwise, if a golf ball hits a car on a driveway, you're going to get sued, especially if you're putting in a new green. Now, you know, if it's an old golf course, you don't have to change it. But if you're putting in something new, and it's a municipal golf course, and you hit someone in the face, you're going to get sued and you'll lose. So that distance from that pin line to that driveway should really be 200 feet, not even the 175 minimum. He says, really, you know, to be safe, you make it 200. So that's the critical criteria, isn't it? Now, another consequence is, see that rectangle there? That's your proposed location for a septic field. It says right there, septic field. Now that will have to be moved slightly further southeast, and that where it says septic field. Move septic field because green cannot be over septic because of frequent watering. You cannot, you know, greens require watering. You can't put a septic field underneath them. Anyway, so it has to be moved. This morning I walked with the Board of Health agent, Paul Pazinski, onto the site and, you know, explained all the stakes to him. And by the way, you know, very roughly had put stakes out there, but I can't swear to the accuracy, plus or minus 10 feet. I said, you know, Paul, do you think there's any problem in shifting the septic field south? He said, I don't see any problem whatsoever doing that. The soils are likely to be the same. By the way, there's a great big there. You see that big rock? That's what's called an erratic. It's left over by the last glacial ice age. It's an amazing... he says, leave it. You know, it's a wonderful hazard. He thinks this 200 feet you have here, by the way, could be 100 feet. But that's just his thinking because he doesn't see any intermittent. He says that's an interrupted stream through that body of wetland. It means the septic field could actually move closer to there. So, you know, anyway, I just put that out to you because, you know, you guys need to talk to Board of Health and Concom about this. Not that it's going to make any difference. It's immaterial to the issues, the big issues up north. Now let's go here. This is a critical issue here. What happens between the 9th green and the first tee, which has to be somewhere over here? Could the parking be there? Could something be there? And he said these words here, you must be able to walk between the 9th green and the first tee across open grassland so that golfers can play 18 holes in 2 rounds. Absolutely critical. He says if you don't do it, you'll lose players. And of course, you know, if we're going to have a municipal course, we want as many players as we can get. We don't want to lose them and walk away because it's a funky course, whatever. So you have to be able to walk from that pinhole straight over to the first tee to go on your second round. And then the possible first tee would be somewhere up here. The operator of the golf course was here over the weekend, John Allen. I was talking about that with him, and he said it definitely should be somewhere there. It's quite a good location. You may need some more trees to sort of on your right as you're looking south to prevent balls being hooked, discourage balls being hooked. Anyway, that seems to work. So the 9th and the 1st, and there's a little thing there at that rectangle. That could be a new possible site for a golf club, which is exactly the same as size as that up there, which is the existing golf club. Right there. It says existing golf club, 45 by 25. Maybe it could be moved without demoing, or maybe it has to be rebuilt. What have I missed out here? Okay. You know, you have, okay, so you look, okay, well, anyway, the huge issue here is this thing in the middle. you need 40 to 50, preferably 50, additional parking spaces for golfers north of this line. They have to be up here in your site. And so the question is, can that be done? Okay, can you flip this? Then go back to the previous one. Previous thing. That one. Yeah, okay, so, no. Oh, yeah, so that's the major conclusion, right? 50 cars parking for golf north of the driveway, oh, God, okay, north of this line here. And now I've got a dotted line there. There's your 200 feet between that slashed line and the pin line for the ninth thing. And you have to have 50 cars north of this driveway, and there's your golf club. So you think, oh, well, okay, this is impossible. But, you know, when you look at the site here, you look at your site layout, and by the way, this is not a criticism in any way intended to your work, because you were never asked to look at this. You know, you did a preliminary layout, and you put it up there. You know, our job is to sort of look at what you did and see, well, can we modify it so everything can work? And miraculously, we think it can, because you have in yellow there the land you're essentially not using. So with a bit of fiddling, okay, now let's go to the next one. Yeah, okay, no, next one. Okay, this one. Okay, now this is a suggestion, it's just a suggestion, and it says schematic up there, parking layout, and it says draft for discussion, but I kind of like use the word miraculously rather advisedly here, because the amazing thing is, you know, that the public safety facility, your site plan, has 25 cars on it for visitors for your public safety facility. And the golf needs 50, ideally. In tournaments, it needs 50. And if you look over here, 25 and 50 equals 75. The parking provided on this site plan is 75. By shifting the building, and there's no change to the footprint of the building. It's exactly the same building you showed on the previous plan. So that means all of your criteria for designing this building remain unchanged. All of your turning radii remain unchanged. Okay, you know, because that was to vote you took, wasn't it? You know, we're willing to accommodate this if we don't interfere with the design criteria. So what's happened here? Okay, there's the police. You see it says police? That would be the police cars, which was down here. It's shifted up there, and it's covered. It's your cover. It's exactly the same size. However many cars you have, they would be there, and they would be covered from the snow. And A, B, and C, there's a note here. This parking for staff and EMT, ABC, totals 30% more than you are currently showing on your current site plan. See, what I'm trying to do is maximize. You know, I'm still conforming to planning board and zoning rules, setbacks required to parking, setbacks required to buildings, etc. You know, can the police building be there? Yes, it's an accessory structure. It can be 10 feet from the property line. And it's incredibly well shielded already by a stone wall and incredibly heavily thick woods up here. So A, B, and C is 30% more than you need. So you can decide how to allocate them, or leave some of them as grass. And you know, these turning radii, I looked at these very carefully today. You know, I'd be surprised. You know, yes, you take a bend here, don't you? And you take a bend, a corner when you come out. But I put it to you, a fire truck coming out there to that light has to take a 90-degree turn. And so these turning radii up here, I think are absolutely workable. And so you see you have 28 spaces there, 28 spaces there, 14 there, and 15 there. And then you can have a sign right there, no public allowed beyond this point. So what we have here, of course, is what Al Hamilton suggested. a week ago or so, was, why can't we share public parking? Why can't we share parking lots between visitors to police fire and golfers? And you come up with the right number of spaces. I'm not sure there's anything else. Do I need to say anything else? Let me just have a look at my notes here. So this is Brian Silver. Maybe this is an expert golf course designer's recommendations. His recommendations were all the way to the south, and I have simply worked up north to see if it could be met up north. And the result, I think, is that the answer is yes. You can end up with a very good workable golf course. And by the way, he calls this golf course a jewel. And either way, it should be saved. Either in the entirety, which would be ideal, of course, or in this way, which is still very good. And the result is, if you take, the line north of there, everything south of that, and you have a conservation restriction, everything south of here, all the way down, all the way over to Latisquama, would all go into a conservation restriction. That's 93% of the remaining land. 93% of the entire land would be saved as open space and recreation. So I think I've said enough there.
So first, I'd like to thank you for your collaborative work effort in trying to maintain as best as possible the footprint and the functional requirements that we've worked pretty tirelessly on. Before I see if any other committee members have questions, I would just like to recommend that you speak to both the police chief and fire chief, if you haven't done it already, to make sure that those turning radiuses actually work. Because it's tough to tell from the view, and especially on the fire side, depending on how they stack their apparatus. But that should be something they would should be able to validate for you. And I think that the second thing that I'll open for discussion amongst the committee is, would we like to formally direct Jeff, not now, but let him have some time to offer his thoughts, because I think obviously there's a lot of work that went into this, but obviously it has significantly flipped the building. So I'm not sure what path we'd like to take in terms of feedback on that. I know as a committee we have decided that we are not advocating for one view or another. We're just trying to work in collaboration to find the best solution for the town. So with that, I'll open it up to questions from the committee for Mr. Perry.
Thank you. One observation, which is I don't think you need 75 spots. I know 25 plus 50 is 75, but it's likely that the peak loadings for each department, each activity, are going to be different. So you probably get away with 60s, which might reduce the asphalt impact. So that's one observation. As I've said before, I walked the site with Mr. Perry and saw how the existing design sat on the land and his challenges. And this committee is on record as saying, if we can make something like this work, we're good with it. Obviously it has to meet the functional requirements. I think if we are to have a snowball's chance of getting this through town meeting, we need every friend we can get, and I'd like to see if we can't keep golf on the site as well.
Before I open it up for public questions, any other committee members have questions for Mr. Perry? Go right ahead.
Hi, I'm Freddie Gillespie, and I'm speaking as a citizen, not representing any commission or committee I sit on. I just wanted to clarify a couple of comments that were made. The Open Space Preservation Commission, which I do sit on, does not have a petition and has not voted on any of the citizens' petitions that are on the warrant. As a private citizen, myself and 4 other members of the community have a citizen's petition asking the selectmen to renegotiate to preserve the whole property with a conservation restriction on it. I did want to say that I appreciate the hard work that Mr. Perry has gone into preparing this, and in the Open Space Commission's opinion, we did say if the town meeting voted to put the public safety there, we thought the rest of the property should have a conservation restriction on it to allow golf to continue and also protect the other open space remaining value of wildlife habitat and whatever else could be salvaged after the buildings go in. However, I want to point out that this citizen's petition gives a false sense of security, and having been involved with land protection and conservation restriction and preservation restriction deals over many years, I can attest that if a conservation restriction is not tied to the purchase of the land, it is meaningless and baseless. There is no requirement for anything to come of this. The land gets purchased and it's free and clear, and there's no requirement because of this for any restriction, for any golf, for any buildings not to be put there. Back in, I think it was 2006 or 2007, town meeting was promised a conservation restriction would be placed on a parcel of land that was being accepted. Roads were being accepted as part of a subdivision plan based on the fact that that conservation restriction would be placed on the land. There is no conservation restriction on that land to date, although the Open Space Commission worked tirelessly to follow up and to make sure that it happened year after year after year, letter after letter, meetings, town council, selectmen, planning board. There is no conservation restriction on that land, and I doubt it will ever happen. So if you want to put a conservation restriction and protect the rest of the land for a golf course, it has to be part of the warrant article to purchase the land. Can't be separate. It has to be already laid out, ready to go, part of the purchase deal. It's not something you can add on after the fact. This is a nice intention, but I think it gives people a false sense that they can, the term that comes to mind, have your cake and eat it too. But there is no guarantee that the next day another building couldn't be proposed to be put on the rest of the land. So this doesn't really provide any surety that this land would be protected in any manner after the town voted on the warrant article to purchase the land. So I would state that. If town meeting did vote to approve this, then trying to work to make this happen would be something I would encourage, but I have no comfort level that it would ever happen. And I think the citizens of the town deserve to know that there's no requirement, no legal requirement for anything to come of this. And furthermore, if that was the goal of your committee, then you would want to renegotiate what is put on town meeting, and I don't think you can do that by March 8th. Oh, and final thing, so I just wanted to also be clear, I wasn't the one who came up with the term eminent domain. I had read that in your minutes, so it wasn't me proposing that the town go after St. Mark's in that way.
Thank you.
Good evening. Andrew Mills, 2 McNeil Drive. For the record, I'm a member of the planning board and the CPC, but speaking as an individual, I'm a butter to the property, so if you slice on the 6th hole, the ball comes into my yard. So needless to say, I will be recusing myself from anything that becomes between before the planning board or the CPC. I had a quick question. I've been to a number of meetings in general and appreciate all the work everyone's being put into this and how much everyone values the golf course itself and the open space. But the discussion came up earlier. I think Mr. Hamilton, you said it, that you know, for the location on 85, you know, this is one of the few parcels. My question is, does the police station have the same requirement as, say, the fire the fire department to be in that zone of a building. You see what I'm saying? Or, Mr. Chairman?
I'll defer to the police chief to answer the question.
Yeah, Mike. Sorry, Chief.
We're able to be a little bit more expansive, but certainly for response times, with the minimal staff we have working, it isn't always the ultimate, where we have people out in sectors, a lot of time that we are responding from the police station. So yeah, we do have a little bit more flexibility as opposed to the fire department, but we still have to be, you know, best case scenario, somewhere located in, you know, the center part of town.
Again, for the purpose of making an informed decision, it might be helpful to understand what that radius is too. I know from a planning perspective, you're looking to consolidate and save funds by having one building for both, but it'd be interesting to just see what that radius would be if they did get separated, for me personally. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just point out for those that haven't heard this before is this committee voted very early on to pursue only a combined facility because we thought that was the best fit for Southborough in a fiscally conservative way. Our initial estimates are it saves approximately 10% of the square footage, which is at least $2 million. And I'm sure we're going to have a discussion on the cost coming up here, so you'll see that every couple of $1 million makes a big difference.
And I appreciate that. I just think, you know, for, 10% of the cost for what the building is now, it's going to be up to town meeting to decide how they want to spend the money, whether it be, you know, split it up and, you know, however it may be. So, thank you. Appreciate it.
Louise Barron, 11 Sadie Hut Lane. I haven't been to some of the meetings, bad, but I'd like to know how much land is now involved in the St. Mark's plan, as opposed to how much land do we currently have with the police and fire station?
It's approximately 2 acres on the current site.
Okay.
And somewhere between 4 and 5 on the new site. I think the one thing to keep in mind is, and Jeff can probably help articulate this, is you'll notice that in every diagram we have 2 access points now. We have an emergency access point, and then we have a public access point. That naturally takes up more land. Plus, there's obviously a significant amount of additional drainage basins, et cetera, that are required just due to current regulations that may not have been in place when the facilities were originally built.
Is there more land we could obtain in the current location of the police and fire stations?
That's how we got to this point, is this committee voted unanimously on a proposal and went to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen approached St. Mark's to acquire approximately 1 acre to the west of the current site, and that's what led to the negotiations for the entirety of the golf course.
Well, what happened to the 1 acre of the site that?
St. Mark's, and you'll see this in some of the press releases that are out there, was very interested in having contiguous land to their current campus. So right next, they want the land that connects right up to their campus versus St. Mark's obviously does not connect to their campus. The golf course doesn't connect to the school
Well, so
campus.
what are you saying about that 1 acre that is next to the fire station?
They were not interested in selling it.
Well, okay, so you're saying the only choice we have is the golf course. What if the residents don't like your choice of building this municipal building on St. Mark's? And what are their other choices? Will you be presenting any other choices to the town?
So I think I'd offer 2 recommendations. This committee works at the direction of the Board of Selectmen. We have made numerous recommendations over time, and they have directed us to attempt to develop a public safety facility on the St. Mark's site because we know that it meets our space needs and functionality requirements. Where I'll direct you is if you have questions about the deal itself, that's better directed to a Board of Selectmen's meeting in how they got to this point. But we did have an information session last Thursday night that was recorded. And I would strongly encourage you to watch the entirety of the presentation because it was a joint presentation by this committee and the Board of Selectmen. And we outlined how we got to this point, both from what sites we analyzed, in addition to how the actual land negotiation deal went down, which is outside of the purview of this committee.
Again, my question is, if the town's people don't like your choice, or the selectmen's choice, or whoever's choice, what's the option? What are the options?
We're going to be forced to go back to the drawing board.
Well,
and I
we
think-
need options. I mean, you can't just stuff this down our throats and say, this is it. You don't like it? Too bad. I want to hear options. As a resident in this town, we have very few choices anymore. Everything has been taken away from us. There's no preservation. Nobody cares to preserve anything. And this is the choice, and here you have it. I say we leave the police station, the fire station, where it is if we can, and work there somehow so that, we can still have a 21st century police and fire station. But, I think we should stay with what we have. There's septic there. There's, is there a
so I would-
conflict with buses on Route 85?
So I would strongly, because we do have a lot of business in front of us, I would strongly recommend that you review the work of this committee and in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen over the last 2 years, because I think that will answer all of the questions that you
Just
were
give me the
outlining.
bus answer I'm looking for. Emergency vehicles and buses, any conflict?
No, because the emergency vehicles are going to be coming down from the entrance where the current golf course is. The
Right.
Woodward school buses are much further up the intersection.
I still see a conflict, thank you anyway.
Hi, Steve Warnock, 208 Corderville. I'm a member of the Community Emergency Response Team. I'm not sure if people in town really know what that is, but there's a number of us that assist the fire and police department in natural emergencies or if they get overwhelmed. And I know we've got a bunch of equipment. There's a number of trailers. There's also a trailer for the police department, the Semlac trailer. There's a couple of light towers, hazmat gear and stuff like that. On the initial plan I saw earlier, it looked like there was a location for the EM storage. And then the next plan looked like that had been taken out. So I'm just kind of curious to where that, because I'm one of the guys that will hook up all those trailers at 2 o'clock in the morning to help out. So just kind of looking to see where that might be, if that's been figured in.
Okay, so to answer your question, the answer is yes, it's still included in the parking area. It's not been labeled specifically, but it has been anticipated.
backside of it?
It's on the backside, yeah. We're gonna have space for those trailers. Yeah, that's a pretty big component of the program requirements for public safety, so it has to be located here. We have to find a space for it, and it will continue to be outside, but it'll be on a paved area.
I know right now there's a Connex box, they have a lot of it storage. That's also been factored to be stored into the building somewhere?
Correct, there's actually a room inside the building for emergency management
Okay.
storage.
Okay, cool, thanks. Appreciate it.
Could I just add to that? Just so you understand, where's your marker? Where's your thing? Okay. You see here, oh, what did I do? Okay.
Try and hit the middle one.
Okay, there, he labels it staff parking 25, and obviously some of those spaces are EMT, aren't they, storage? That's what you're saying, right?
That's right.
Okay, I just want to reiterate, that link there, on the previous slide, the suggested modified slide, has 30% more linear parking area to accommodate staff parking and EMT and whatever.
Go ahead.
John Thorburn, 162 Main Street. I had addressed my remarks to the consultant. From my experience building a fire station in Weston. Thought I heard you say that there was going to be a flat roof on the far left side because of cost constraints, but I
No,
was...
there was, sorry to interrupt, there was no issue with the cost necessarily, constraint or otherwise, but that's such a large area of roof, to put a pitched roof over it would be a very different visual impact for this particular building where it is. Plus, I'll go into show you the plan here. The second floor plan has bedrooms for the firefighters. In this location, just to the right of the roof area, and those all require windows. So if we had a pitched roof here, there wouldn't be any windows in that area, which I think would probably be bad. I'm not saying we could never do a pitched roof. I'm just saying in this particular design, it wouldn't work very well.
Well, my suggestion would be that you work on something that doesn't involve a flat roof, because down through the years, flat roofs, I don't know whether they've improved that much, but in this area of the country, they're not a good idea.
Any other comments from the committee, or? All right, so we are going to transition. Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Can I just say one other thing, just to finish? Next Tuesday, John Wilson is having a meeting with the Board of Selectmen on February the 7th to discuss operating a municipal golf course. I just put that out there so people are aware of it in a week's time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess before we move on to cost, which I know we've put off a little bit here, is does this committee want to make any motions or directives to our consultant related to Mr. Perry's plan? Mr. Hamilton?
I move that we thank Mr. Perry for his diligent efforts and that we ask the Dunham and Sweeney to seriously evaluate his proposal with the intent of trying to accommodate to the greatest degree practical golf course operations on the site.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion amongst committee members? All in favor?
I just want to offer, I know you'd like us to weigh this option in the future, and I'm happy to, and I'm not going to offer a specific requirement, comments right now. I just want to say that this is a slightly different version than we showed to us last week. Hadn't seen this one before, as was pointed out. And this one, as I stated before, the option I saw did change the building in a physical way. This one just rotates it. So I wanted to clarify that earlier I said that there was going to be a significant impact to the building design itself. This one does not appear to change the building itself. It changes the site. Other than that, I think as a firm we'd be happy, as we've shown I think through this process, to continue to work on options at the direction of the committee and try to improve it as you've all directed us and I think wanted to throughout this process. As I think we've shown in our presentation, as the building continues to improve, modifications happen, it turns, it modifies. I think that's the goal of all of us here, to make the best possible project for the town. And I don't necessarily see any showstoppers today, but I think, as you weigh the vote, to direct us to continue to work on this, I'm more than happy to, do that going forward. Incorporate this if that's your determination.
We'll need a timeline to do that? Do you have enough time to do that?
Timeline being what?
Knowing that we have a presentation to make at town meeting, or would you be able to come up with a approval or
I think
design
that
by
we
then?
can certainly make alterations to our current design, and I think we can make some statements about impact to cost, if there is any. I think probably the biggest things, given it's a site modification, would be having our civil engineer involved in evaluating some of the changes, particularly when it comes to drainage. Obviously, adding more parking potentially would impact drainage and relocating some of that drainage on the site might be problematic as well. So I don't want to get into details, but I think we can work on it. I think we can talk about the timing specifically of when that information can be provided. I know our current schedule has us meeting next week with the Board of Selectmen, giving them essentially an information session just like this. I don't think we'd be able to meet that meeting, but probably sometime after that, we'd be able to revise it.
Mr. Hamilton, just to clarify your motion, you're looking for comments on this plan. You're not looking for a Donovan Sweeney logo in the bottom right-hand corner showing this plan. Is just to make sure we understand.
I would leave it up to Donovan Sweeney as to, you know, what they want to do, understanding that, at least in my humble opinion, making this work well with the golf course is critical to securing passage. You know, no passage, no building, you know, we've all wasted our time.
Just so we're clear, though, I think what you're talking about is, we're talking about scope creep. We're starting to creep here, and we've got a limited amount of funds to pay these guys to do what we need them to do, and I do understand and I do agree, but right now we don't have anybody to take direction from as far as the golf course, and then once we start layering on another round of instructions to give to these guys, we're starting to creep. So
scope creep is you know, I've worked in the requirement space for decades, and the reality is, you know, that this building or this concept is what I would call beta test. You know, we put our idea out into the world, and when you put your idea out into the world, your customers tell you what they like, and your customers tell you what they don't like. And that is a normal part of the design process, and certainly should be included, I think, in this. And when your customers tell you about something they don't like, you jolly well need to listen to them and adapt, because in the end you need to be successful, and those that don't adapt aren't successful. So I'm not sure that this formally calls for scope creep. It certainly is the uncovering of hidden requirements, which is a normal part of this process.
Are there any other comments from committee members?
I just think that we should look into that alternative. If it costs the town a few more dollars to have a professional consultant look at it, I think that's money well spent.
We would need to
we would probably need to do that.
approach the Board of Selectmen
I
and
mean, talking
potentially advisory.
Right.
So we
Talking
can't.
about discussion, I don't think it would be a whole lot of money, but certainly I think it would be money well spent to look at it. Also, if we think things might change, maybe putting that meeting off
Well,
for a week or so, if that's the time he thinks he can meet.
So I think it's important, right, for this committee to remember that, you know, we're not trying to accommodate any one group of interest in town. Our job is to present the best proposal for where we think a public safety facility can sit on this site to meet the functional requirements. I'm very well aware that obviously we have to get the land before we can even have a vote on the warrant article. So I'd recommend that we give Donovan Sweeney the week to at least kick the tires and come back to us, you know, with at least any showstoppers, and maybe come back to us with a recommended approach for how to formally, say yay or nay that this meets our functional requirements. Is that a reasonable?
Do you think you could have a pretty good idea whether you can make this work by next Monday?
I already have 7 ideas, I think, based on what I've seen today. I'm not going to share them with you because they're untested yet, but yeah, we definitely, in a week, we can have a list of.
By our next meeting, you can show us.
Yeah, we have a list of thoughts about what we've seen here, what the potential impacts might be on the operations of the departments. I think the chiefs, as you point out, should be involved in their feedback on the operations of their department here. I don't see this as a difficult challenge in a week to do that, to have essentially a written up list of comments essentially on it, and you can, hear them and take them into consideration. And then Beyond that, whether we do a redesign to look at this, it's up to you, or you just take the comments under advisement.
I like that.
I mean, I think for the record that if we had known about this when we hired you, we surely would have included that in our directives, but we didn't know about it then. I mean, we tried to see as much as we could for the best of the town, and that was one thing that we just didn't know about at the time.
I do agree with Mr. Hamilton that we do need to look at this as best we can, because I do think this is one of our best chances of getting this to pass. So if we could make it a priority to at least know the big hurdles by next week, or if there are any big hurdles. Or
Okay. Is there any other discussion amongst the committee? All those in favor for directing Donovan Sweeney to evaluate this plan and come back to us next week?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carries. I think, for those of you in the audience, we are going to have a shift in our agenda, and we're going to ask Jeff to walk us through where we stand on the cost. So those other boards that are here, you're more than welcome to stay, but I just wanted to let you know there will be no more discussions of site location, site planning, for the remainder of our agenda. So with that, Jeff, I will turn the floor back over to you.
Okay, I'm skipping to the end of this presentation, and Ellen's going to hand out some papers so you have it in front of you as well, because for whatever reason it doesn't show too well on the screen. So I'll wait till those papers pass around. So what you're looking at is the same budget sheet we showed at the last meeting. We've kept the column that we showed you at the last meeting so you can compare it. And we've added a column for this week's meeting. First thing I want to point out is the top line. Under square footage, the facility size has dropped almost 3,000 square feet. That was because of, again, the change to the apparatus bay, but also the tightening that we did throughout the rest of the facility. We also tightened the site plan up quite a bit, so there was a drop in the site construction cost. The square footage of the building went down, and we actually have a full cost estimate from our cost estimator. So instead of using a cost per square footage number, we were able to use a accurate, fully line item estimated cost estimate from our professional cost estimator. So that number for the building has gone down as well because of the square footage going down. Down under the line of escalation, we did note from our cost estimator that he's changed his advisement from 6% to 4%. So that number is also decreased. Going down below under the soft cost, you'll see that various other line items have decreased, including design, owner's project management, and at the very bottom, the project contingency, and those line items have decreased because they're percentages based upon the construction cost. And of course, these are budgets numbers at this point. These aren't actual contracts or anything at this point. The only other thing I will note is that the offsite utilities number, the $500,000, is still a guess at this point because we do not yet have accurate numbers or accurate scope per se on whether or not we will have a gas line, whether we'll be doing an oil-fed system, or whether there be electrical costs sorry, I should say water line costs for extending the utilities to this site. So the bottom line here is that at the prior meeting, we talked about a project budget of just under 25 million. We are now at a little under 22.9, which is about a $2 million decrease in cost. So that's sort of the overview. I'll turn it over to questions.
Any questions, comments from the committee?
I did. We're doing contingency, 10% contingency on hard and soft.
Yes.
Hard and soft cost, right?
Correct.
Because just for a point of clarification, back when we did this a year and a half ago, I do think that was lower. I think it was just hard costs and
The contingency?
the contingency, but back once upon a time. So I
It's
think that would have put us to
Yeah.
a number back then lower than it would have been if we
If
were
we had contingency
doing
on
hard
the
and
soft.
correct. And that's still, we're still at 4% or 400 square foot.
Roughly, yeah. I
Or
mean, if you
two,
add it
yeah.
all together, it's going to be more than that, including the off-site utilities, the communication tower, and some of the other stuff. If you just take the 17 into the 35.6, it's going to be a different number.
But just construction costs.
$488.
Yeah, I knew he'd have it.
And for escalation purposes, can we get, if we okay this in March and we get moving, rolling along, can we get through a construction document package by this time next year, I guess?
Yeah, this is based on a spring bid.
Right.
2018, spring 2018. I think that's realistically
You guys would be comfortable
the
with that?
fastest that you'd want to budget moving,
Yep.
at this point, whether we actually get it out in the spring or it's in the middle
Summer.
of the winter or something like that. That might be more advantageous to get it out earlier, but
Correct.
I think that's the wise thing to budget.
Just to confirm, even if it's successful at special town meeting, it would also have to go to the polls in May.
Right.
So the earliest we would have a definitive path forward would be May. Mr. Hamilton?
The directives that we got from the Board of Selectmen, who are our bosses, was that we were to not bring this in above 20.85 million, so we're still 2 million off. And I know there were a number of suggestions. I don't know whether you've reviewed them. I know I gave you about 10 bad ideas, I'm sure. I think it's important to remember that I don't think we've been necessarily as careful with the taxpayers' dollars as we should have been to date. And, many of us here can afford the several $100s it's going to cost each and every family in Southborough, but there are families living on fixed incomes for whom a tax increase of several $100s is a real hardship. And so I am unwilling to support 22.8. I'm on record. I agree with the Selectmen's directive of 20.85.
You may want to, while the selectmen are here, you may want to have,
Mr.
it's on. You may want to have the selectmen, while they're still here, clarify the directive, because when I spoke to him at our information center the other day, he said that was based on information that he didn't have, so maybe we can ask him again to clarify the directive.
They have since departed, but we can certainly reach out and solicit formal feedback. From my perspective, obviously every dollar matters, but
I agree.
I think it behooves us to go to town meeting with the right number and not try to anchor ourselves to a number that was for a different site, was a year and a half ago, and was done with a significant number of assumptions. I think the better path forward for this committee, and this goes along with the correspondence to our consultants after our last meeting, is maybe, Jeff, if you could walk through some areas that you may not recommend cutting from the program, but areas where there may be some savings that we can certainly either provide a menu of options to the Board of Selectmen and potentially the town, depending upon their directive, or ways that we could scale the project such that, there would be certain items like the apparatus bays that you build out to a certain extent, and if the project's working the way it's supposed to go, you complete the project, but you kind of put some parameters or menu of options in the actual bidding. So I don't know if you can walk us through some options there.
Sure. We discussed a couple of options, one of which the fire chief has already sort of taken up, and that is to eliminate portion of the apparatus bay for pieces that aren't currently owned by the town. takes a chunk out of the apparatus bay, and it's actually included in the pricing that we have, estimating that we have currently. Another is the training, and I will just preface this by saying that these are options to consider. I know that for a fact that the fire chief would disagree with some of these, but he's not here to defend them right now.
He was on record at prior meetings.
In prior meeting, he was on record against this, but the training tower and little training room for the fire department and off the apparatus bay is another item that could be put on that list. The signal, traffic signal at the road entrance is another item that could be put on that list. The covered cruiser parking, covering structure could be put on that list. I think it's wise for the town to consider options as they go forward with a project such as this that could be put in the bid package. In other words, could be designed and then put in the bid package as alternatives. And you would go and do a bid with several alternatives. And if the bids came in at a reasonable number and the town can afford, the town could take advantage of options at bidding to bring these pieces back into the project. So in other words, the building would be designed to have them in, and only if the bidding came in favorably would you actually end up building them. If that was not palatable, the town certainly could. These are all options the town could actually build onto the building in the future. I think apart from those things, anything else we do to the structure itself would be so integrated with the rest of the building, the police and fire areas of the building itself, that taking any one piece of it off would seriously impact their operations, and I think would be detrimental to the project to the extent that it would make the reason for doing it less advantageous. But the things I listed, I think, are a good, pretty complete list of things that we could put on the table. And I think all of them, apart from the cruiser covering, I think we've talked about before as potentials. So that would be my list, and that's what we've just developed in the last 3 or 4 days. I suppose there's a possibility we could come up with other options, but nothing at this point sort of jumping off the page.
Chief, not to put you on the spot, but do you, in the fire chief, I don't know if you've had any conversations, have a strong view on the traffic signal? Clearly for the residents, right, there was a traffic signal that was budgeted and approved as part of the Main Street project for the current site. A new signal would be required and is included in our budget now for the St. Mark's site. Do you view that as a necessity for safety?
I think it's stronger on the fire end, and I wouldn't speak for... I think it's stronger on the fire end, so I wouldn't speak for the fire chief. He's not here. I did have some thoughts on that, knowing that Route 85 is a state road, so maybe we could seek some alternative funding somewhere to get that done at some point. So I would rather kind of work around that in the future, just personally. I'm not speaking for the fire chief, than cut out any of the space at this point.
Jeff, by not putting in like some of the spaces we talked about taken out, what would the cost be 10 years from now to bring that space back?
Yeah, obviously I don't know exactly, but it's clearly higher. Any dollar you wait and spend later is going to be worth more than $1. And it may not be as easy to build, too. While you have a general contractor involved here, that is cheaper space to build. Now, if you employ a general contractor in the future just to build essentially a carport, it's going to cost you more because you've got more overhead, more oversight. So it's not necessarily recommended. If you want to build it and your intention is to build it, it's always better to build it now. But if the money isn't there and it's something you do want or could consider deferring, it is still feasible. I guess that's the best way to put it. It's feasible to build it in the future. It may not be cost effective, but it's feasible.
Just did have one other comment when you're speaking of the carport. I drive around and I see these projects with the solar roof covered on parking. So I don't know if it would be advantageous to see what somebody could bid that, make that carport into something that makes money or is neutral. Or if a contractor in town, we have one right on Newton Street that built a whole parking lot full of it. So just something else to explore.
Mr. Wood?
Jeff, to Al's point, is there any way to make this building more efficient without all these little alcoves and exterior walls and still meet the space needs and everything?
I think
Have
we
it
could
more
potentially
square.
make the building a more regular shape. I think a couple iterations earlier, we showed some more boxier buildings that were pretty regular, geometric, rectangular shapes. I think in the effort to try and squeeze every square footage out, where it got squeezed out, that's kind of where the building started to get
To Al's
pushed
word,
in.
herniate?
I think there is possibly a way to go back and look at redesigning it, but I wouldn't say it's going to save an appreciable amount of money, a very big amount of money. I think we're talking about, less than $100,000.
Well, will it compromise our space needs? I don't want to do that either.
It's hard to say at this point. I think the additional cost of potentially having some ins and outs in the building isn't going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars if we had a regular sort of pure shape.
That doesn't get me down to
Because
the
we still have the
21.8.
same, no, we still have, it's not going to be $2 million savings. We still have the same amount of square footage, it's just in a slightly different form.
And we're so baked in from the beginning that I don't think there's savings by eliminating corners and angles, so.
I think we are at the point now where we're looking to save $100,000 bills. So if you could save a $100,000 bill, I think frankly, this committee owes it to the taxpayers to save $100,000. You know what Everett Dixon said, a billion here, a billion there, sooner or later it adds up to real money. On Southborough, 100,000 here, 100,000 there adds up to real money.
I also noticed, I'm sorry, may I speak?
Go ahead.
I also noticed you have the emergency access on the Choate Field property line. Does that save us some money? Because I remember before we were talking about the culvert crossing.
It did, and that's why the site construction cost went down to some degree. It's about $130,000 less than the previous month. There was a slight difference in the way the numbers, what was calculated, because in the prior month, we did this project based upon a cost per square foot basis, and this time we're looking at it based upon an actual cost estimate, so line items, which means that some of this, because of general conditions and overheads, things like that, it got put into different line items. So the real savings in the site cost is probably more than 130, but just because of the way the math worked, it only shows up as 130.
Now, have we talked to anybody to make sure that this is something we can do, going to Choate Field? Have we set up any of the negotiations? Because I know it's got to be between
It's
St.
probably
Mark's
not for me to answer.
Yeah, I think if the committee is interested in exploring that, then we need to enter into formal discussions with the parties that have the authority to grant
I think we
that
should then.
access.
May I make a motion?
Go for it.
I move that the committee ask the Board of Selectmen to approach the Faith School, St. Mark's, and the chairman of the Southborough School Committee to request permission to use a strip of land as shown in the current plan for the purpose of a driveway from Choate Field,
On the south side, Choate Field.
on the south side of Choate Field.
Second.
We got a second. Is there any discussion amongst the committee?
I think you should, because we're in a public meeting, I think you should explain that
Oh, sure.
choke process, so there's not misinformation out there.
Certainly. The Choate Field, which it was deeded to the town, I think near 90 or 100 years ago, it was a long time ago, had in the deed that it was intended for use for recreational purposes for the town of Southborough. There may have been some extra words in there. But that use can be amended if it is approved by 2 out of 3 of the headmaster of the Faith School, the headmaster of St. Mark's, or the chairman of the Southborough School Committee. And so in order to use that small strip of land, we would need to secure the permission of at least 2 out of those 3. That's my understanding, and that came from a letter from town council.
Last question. That doesn't impact the fields very much. I've walked the land when I was checking out Mr. Perry's version.
We don't feel that it impacts the field at all. What we do feel like is it impacts some of the vegetation that's there, but what our intention is to save as many of the mature trees and create sort of a green strip between the two driveways, that those trees are pretty much right on the property line. So we can weave the driveway around the other side of the trees, then I think it's a pretty win-win solution.
Wouldn't affect the soccer fields or anything like that. Perfect.
Is there any further conversation? Ready to vote? All those in favor? Any opposed? So carries. Just an observation on the budget. When I look at the new traffic signal, the communication tower, and the escalation, that's 1.2 million approximately, right? So if you take that and add it to the 20.8, we're at 22 million. I think those are fairly easy to explain to someone how a different site yields a different cost, due to a delay, plus a new site. Is there anything else you would point to, and we've been putting these side by side, of course, and we'll take the latest one, that you would point to as a reason why the 20.8 number, and I think Michael already referred to one other, in terms of contingency on hard and soft versus soft, any other areas that you would stress have changed in your understanding of the scope of the project that make you recommend the number that you're recommending to us now?
I think the only other difference between the prior site, the existing site, and this is that the existing site has existing facilities on it, and those facilities would have to be accommodated if we were building there, as you pointed out earlier in the meeting, in a temporary conditions sort of way. And so this budget doesn't have any money allocated to temporary living quarters or anything, because that could all be operated while this facility was being constructed. So that's at zero, and that's the major, I think, a major difference between the two sites.
I guess what I'm trying to bridge is, mainly to help concern over whether the selectmen dictated to us whether 20.8 is the number we have to come in at.
Right.
I think I've outlined 1.2 million of why that number is what it
Sure.
is.
Utilities extension, traffic signal, communication tower, all of those are not part of that original number.
In time, right? In time.
Time, yeah, certainly the year's worth of time that's gone by.
So just to outline that, Mr. Hamilton, I'll give you the floor, is we're saying that the traffic signal at a cost of 400,000, the communication tower at 150,000, the off-site utilities extension of 500,000, and a 4% escalation of 678,000, plus the addition of a 10% contingency to the soft costs, that really makes up the delta between the number that we were presented in December of 2015 and today.
Yep. And
Big picture.
Proportionate increases also in design fees, OPM fees, and contingency fees.
Mr. Hamilton?
Mr. Chairman, I take exception to, and I'm sure you didn't mean it this way, that the Board of Selectmen dictated to us. I think it's important to remember that we don't make policy. Policy is made by our elected leaders, and the Board of Selectmen were each elected by well over 1,000 townspeople. And so it is their right and their duty to make policy and to give policy direction. And they have done that with us, and I think that we need to respect that. Now, if we want to go back and argue with them or debate the wisdom of their policy, but until such time as we do that, that is the policy. And, I think that we, as their appointees and as members of their administration, are honor-bound to attempt our level best to achieve that goal.
I also think that a lot of it comes down to the education and information that we present to them. At the last discussion we had with them, we were working with a number that was about 2 hours old, which had come down about $2 million in a couple of days. So I'm not sure that when we had that last discussion with them in some of their requests that were made of us, I'm not sure that those requests were made under a full amount of information being available to them. So what I'd recommend, and I'm not recommending necessarily a vote right this second on the cost, but what I'd recommend is one of two options. One, I can go back to the board in advance of next Tuesday's meeting when we will be appearing in front of them and gain absolute certainty on what their requests are or are not. And then this committee can meet to discuss and figure out whether we meet those requests or not. Or number two, this committee can develop a presentation outlining the pros and cons of the current number that's presented in front of us, maybe a menu of options to reduce the price, and what it would take to get to 20.8 million. Because I don't want to speak for you, Jeff, but I guess what I'm reading is you're not going to get to 20.8 without sacrificing the functional requirements and the space needs that this committee unanimously voted on in 2015.
I agree with that.
So I'll open up for discussion on what the best path forward is. I'm not sure that this number is going to change without changing the requirements. And I think this board needs to do, the committee needs to do an educational seminar for not only the Board of Selectmen, but the community and advisory, so that they're aware of the pros and cons of a higher versus a lower cost. So any discussion or feedback on that?
Well, yeah, I think we need to get squared away with what we're allowed to spend. I mean, are we allowed to spend, do we have a number? But we know what we can get to on the design side, but what I'm not clear is what we can get to from the town side. So that's, I just want to be clear what we have to be, what our restrictions are.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, I just don't think when we had that meeting with the selectmen that we were really, they were fully informed of what the situation was when they made that statement. I mean, we weren't really comparing apples to apples. They were going off the old numbers that didn't include traffic lights and didn't include a year delay, which costs money because of inflation. And I think the selectmen, they're pretty smart. I think this is an argument that could obviously be articulated that they would maybe think about. The number has to change if it's a year later and it costs more money. You can't just say no, make it smaller. Or one includes a traffic light and one didn't. You can't just say tough luck, make the building smaller. I mean, I think we should take the traffic light out and let that particular item sail on its own. If it's needed, they can do it at another time or another funding mechanism. But you know, I want to get the building and I want it to fit the department's needs.
Couple of quick questions. At our last meeting, we discussed reusing the dispatch equipment. Is that now figured into these numbers?
I don't have any information on that. I think I see that the number hasn't changed, but that's up for discussion. I don't know if we'd have to get a consultant to look at what we can bring over, but that's certainly on the table.
Yeah, there would certainly be new equipment needed, because we have 3 positions. I think you have 2 now currently.
Correct.
Yeah, so there'd be 3 positions in the new building.
My understanding was that the design was for 2 with space optionally to add a 3rd at some future date.
And that's certainly up to the town to decide whether they want to buy it now or later. I'm just saying that there would be 3 positions in the current design, and whether those were brought over or made new. Right now, the budget has $250,000 for dispatch equipment. It's possible that that could be reduced depending on the needs of the department. I think a point that was made earlier about the state of the project, currently it's a very conceptual level of what there's a lot of decisions that need to be made over the course of the project as to what we're going to do in equipment needs, furniture needs, security, cameras, a whole host of computer servers, things like that, a whole host of things that will get made. What we've tried to do with the budget now is represent what we believe the most conservative viewpoint would be, so that the town isn't hamstrung in the future if they choose to make a different decision than what is maybe conceived of today.
With all due respect, having watched a number of construction projects in this town, it is a dead certainty that whatever town meeting votes will be spent. Every last dollar.
Yeah.
And then some.
I guess I don't. Maybe that's what's happened in the past, but I can tell you, if the committee so wishes, I think any presentation that we make to the Board of Selectmen, to town meeting, to advisory, we absolutely have to recommend for some sort of construction oversight, and whether it's a proportion of this same committee or another committee or even advisory themselves. They absolutely have to be the watchdogs of this project. And even if we do get approval at town meeting, I think we should be striving to come in much less.
All of our large-scale construction projects have had similar oversight committees. I've known some of the people on them. They've got construction experience. They're good folks. It's, we need to understand how this works. I think at our last meeting, I believe we asked the chiefs to take a look at whether there was equipment. Our dispatch equipment is, 2 years old? 3 years old. So it's modern equipment. As I say, I'm looking for $100,000 bills right now, because you add up the $100,000 bills, and that's how you get to the next number. And so I think I would encourage you between now and our next meeting to have that discussion, put it in the plan. There are always, if it comes out that, we can't do that at some future date, there are other funding mechanisms available. I would recommend we proceed as follows, that we allow Donovan Sweeney to discuss with the chiefs, any equipment we can reasonably reuse. I'm not asking you to move junk. But there was some discussion about equipment we could reuse, and that you look at, whether there are those $100,000 bills in terms of regularizing the skin of the building, and come back to us with a number, and then the list of things that we would have to give up to make the 20.85. And at that point, we can have a discussion, because at the end of the day, this is the selectmen's call.
Because we're meeting with them next Tuesday, correct?
We are. So I think that's the topic for discussion here, is we have a posted meeting already for next Monday night. And we got to turn around and bring a figure the following night with, it's got to be a presentation. It's not just going to be on a whim. So what I would recommend, I think all those are good suggestions, Al, but I do think that this committee needs to give some sort of direction of how far do you go? Because, again, I don't want to put words into your mouth, Jeff, but once you take out a traffic light, right, I would recommend that we do vote on whether we should include or exclude that from our proposal tonight. You're just going to go to the building construction cost, and you're going to start chopping square footage, and you're going to plug to a number that then works at the bottom of the page. And then you're going to have to go back to the chiefs and say, okay, chiefs, I cut out 1,000 square feet. Where are we going to find it? Is that essentially what's going to happen if that's the directive we gave you?
If the directive is to reach 20.8 million, yeah, there's no other way to find $2 million than to go into the actual building square footage. At this point, my recommendation to you is that there is no square footage in the building that I can cut without cutting into actual requirements from the departments. So if I cut it out, I don't even have to go back to Joe. I don't have to go back to the chief. I know what they're going to say. They can't live without, if I take their Sallyport out, or if I take their garage space out, they're going to say, where do I put this? Where do I put that? So I don't think it's even needed to go back to the chiefs. I think it's just a matter of whether the committee wants to go back on the program that was originally voted on and revise it and say, well, we don't actually need these things. I certainly can take another look, as Al suggested, at the furnishings, fixtures, and equipment line items to find some money there. If there's existing equipment that can be moved over, I don't see any reason why, if it's a couple of years old, that it couldn't be moved over. There might be additional components needed. I don't think we have the time, to do an exhaustive study as to what those components are. So there will need to be some budget allowed for some communications equipment being in there. Certain things like furnishings, that number is based on a historical dollar per square foot basis of buying new furniture. If the town decides it wants to move old furniture over there, well, that number would go down. But I think at this stage, it's the next level down of information that we haven't gotten to because we've been flying at a higher altitude. Those things certainly can be scrutinized. Again, I think we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even $100,000 total. So saving $2 million is going to require cuts to program square footage.
So, Mr. Lyons?
And I was personally involved in a police building project, and we saved over $1 million. It's just having a good owner's project manager, working with the architect. Change orders are the biggest cost. So if you design it right and you do it right, the less change orders, the less the cost. So there will be savings if it's done right. It's an overall budget.
So in my proposal here for discussion amongst the committee would be, we can certainly look at the traffic light. I think I reiterate, we should take a vote on that and have a discussion now. But I think we should also, if there is some equipment that may be able to be reused, certainly let's shave that off the price before we bring it forward. My personal view is we shouldn't be shaving things off just to shave them off. If we don't know it's going to work, keep it in and work and strive through oversight of the project to not spend that full budget, right? And hold individuals accountable. And I think you can hold individuals accountable even if it hasn't been done before. What I would recommend is that we bring this number to wherever we think we can get it and stand behind. Present that with a comparison to where we were at in December of 2015 to the Board of Selectmen. And if on February 7th, they come back to us and say, in that presentation, whatever the number ends up being, and it's not going to get down to 20.8 without sacrificing the cost. If they say, get to 20.8, then we will educate them that cuts will need to be made to the building, and we'll be going against the formal vote of this committee to meet the space needs. So I'll open it up for feedback to that, but I think in the interest of time, in starting to socialize this with not only the Board of Selectmen, but advisory, which we need to schedule a meeting date on tonight, I think that's the path forward. So open for reaction to the general plan, and then I'd like to have some discussion specifically on the traffic light, because I think that's the single largest item out there right now.
I think it's a good course of action. We are where we are, and we're not where we used to be 18 months ago. So I think we just have to describe very intelligently where we are at today. And if it's square footage or if it's dollars, it's important to us. We have to all be able to make an informed decision. So this is an estimate. This is what we, fingers crossed, hope it could cost a year from now. But it's not a hard bid. I mean, this is just an estimate of where we could be. So I like the course of action. So.
Mr. Hamilton?
Well, this isn't an estimate. We will go to town meeting based on whatever number gets approved. And we will ask town meeting to vote the taxes to pay back the bond in this sum. So it's more than an estimate. This is a request from the voters of the town of Southborough to pay additional taxes. And as I say, if the number is 20.85 or 25 or 30 or whatever the number is, you know, in my experience, in the finances of the town, that number will find a way to be consumed. And, you know, I think we should have our eyes wide open on that front. So, you know, we are asking the town, I put this in sort of the stark ways, is we are asking the town to raise the taxes by hundreds of dollars a year on senior citizens living on fixed incomes. And so we have to be able to look someone in the eye who's in that category and say, yes, we've done our level best to, and that I need every last penny of that. And that's, you know, always been my personal mantra.
I just think, you know, to provide some data out there so that the committee is making the right decisions as we, on our path forward. According to the town treasurer, the $2 million delta we're talking about here between the latest number that Jeff is providing us in the 20.8 of where we were in December of 2015. On the average taxpayer, every million of this project costs, on a gross basis, approximately $15. So on an annual basis, it's the average assessed value. So what we are talking about here, you know, potentially is sacrificing project needs and asking the voters for an additional somewhere between $15 to $30 annually on their property taxes on a gross basis. So just to add some context to what we're talking about here to an individual taxpayer.
So I've always disliked that argument. The truth is that what we're asking the average taxpayer is for somewhere between $315 and $345 a year on the median assessed home. And so, you know, that $15 number is pretty close to the number I calculated, so I'll believe it. But, you know, every time somebody uses, you know, it's only 17 cents per thousand, you know, we need to be upfront about what the real cost is, you know, we should not be taking that tack. Let's look people in the eye, let's tell them exactly what they're gonna have to pay, and, you know, our duty, I think, to the taxpayers is to do everything possible. I have a different take on requirements. Yes, we voted requirements. We voted requirements in the absence of any cost information. In every project I've ever worked on in my life, you know, when requirements meet costs, usually requirements lose. And so, you know, I think we've got to go back and, as I said, we're looking for $100,000 bills. You know, I'm on record as not liking this building because, for a variety of other reasons, you know, I think it's a monument to functional silos. And it is, I think, a very, very inefficient design in terms of skin to volume. So, you know, I'm not happy with how this is rolled out. And I think that inefficiency is expressing itself at $488 a square foot. And so I'm here because, you know, I've got a background in finance, and I'm the town cheapskate, and I'm going to continue to be the town cheapskate going forward. But that's my feelings on the subject.
Jeff, did you guys do any efficiency calculations on your current?
I don't have them in front of me, but I believe the original program was somewhere around this number, and I think we had 25%, 30%. I think the grossing factor was 30%.
So can we call it
30%. So I think it's
70%
somewhere
efficient?
around 70% efficient,
Right.
which is basically what the program, the space needs program that was voted on.
Right.
It's pretty much around the same number.
Where we were, and where do you see these buildings that you've built before? They come in at 70? Is that about where they are?
An industry standard, right. Fire stations tend to be more efficient than police stations just for the nature of the space. There's less quarters. on a public safety building, 35% typically, 35 to 40% around there. That's what we would do in a space needs. We always aim to beat it, so I think getting to 30 is pretty average for us. On an efficiency standpoint, being 70% efficient. Certainly as the project progresses, if it progresses, we would intend to continue to improve upon that, find ways to make the building better. But ultimately, a lot of it has to do with the function of the spaces, what spaces have to be next to other spaces. So in certain ways, we're limited. It's not an office building. We can't just move it around wherever we want. So I think we're right in line.
Okay, and then something else I wanted to ask you about is we'll take this out to a GMP, right? We'll do a greatest maximum price when we take it out to
You certainly
bid.
have the option to go with a CM at risk and get essentially a GMP, although in Massachusetts, doing it under a CM at risk is a little bit different. It's
Well,
because of
they-
the public bidding
They
requirements.
usually do file sub bid.
So a more typical, traditional approach is to do a typical design bid build with a lump sum hard bid. But certainly Massachusetts does have the option at a dollar value of this magnitude of doing a CM at risk project, but you would definitely, in both options, you would have still the filed sub bids.
Okay, and I don't know how the town's done it before on other projects with their contractors, so I'm new to that in the town, right?
I think that if this goes through and the funding is secured, before we let any contract, whatever committee, because at that point, this committee's job is done. So and then it's up to the selectmen to figure out whether this committee continues, or typically you're gonna then form a building committee. And understanding the whys and the wherefores of public sector contracting will then be very, very important. I suspect that the nature of who sits on this committee should probably change to include, people with construction experience and people with public sector contracting experience, because it's not designed to be taxpayer-friendly. So, that next phase is a very different set of requirements on a building committee.
So maybe I'll change the topic of the discussion to keep us moving a little bit here, but on the traffic light itself, I think this committee needs to go on record of whether we're gonna include it in or out, and we need to outline the pros and cons to that to the Board of Selectmen, and let them choose ultimately whether to put it in or out. But if this committee has a strong view one way or another, I think we should be on record about that. We've heard the police chief's opinion. I know the fire chief is unable to attend tonight, but theoretically, do we want to wait for his direction next week, or does this committee want to? It's not necessarily a matter of safety; it's a matter of optics in terms of what budget it goes in under, and when does it need to be done.
Can I ask, since I don't use these trucks, why can't we use the one that we have currently
There isn't one.
out front of our fire station?
There is not.
Oh, there was one going in for, is that right?
Correct.
There was one going in. Okay, there was one going in.
Is there any other?
Mr. Chairman, may I make a motion?
Go for it.
Okay. I move that the committee request the town administrator and the chiefs to explore alternative sources of funding for traffic signals and controls, and if not, that we show traffic signals and controls as an option in presenting the budgets to the Board of Selectmen.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion on that matter? We ready for a vote? All those in favor? No one opposed? Motion carries. So now it comes.
May I make one more motion?
Go.
Okay. I move that we formally request the chiefs and the town administrator to evaluate what equipment might reasonably be moved to the new facility without sacrificing functionality, of course, and that they communicate that list to Dunham and Sweeney as quickly as practical.
But no later than February 6th.
Yeah.
There a second to that?
I would say it's too early in the project. There'd be a cost associated with disassembling and reconstructing it. Maybe it's cheaper just to buy new.
At $250,000?
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, I know I wouldn't. I think we need to have that list of things, and, you know, we can dig into them further if we need to. Just, you know, the number that we're going to ask for is not going to be set in stone on February 6th or 7th. There would be options to adjust that number going forward, but I think if we don't do the work, we won't have the option.
Yeah, I would argue that the lion's share of the work needs to be done by February 6th, and we need to say it's feasible or it's not feasible. I do agree with Mr. Lyons' comment, but I also think that there's no reason not to just explore it and say we looked at it and, you know, maybe we can't get to a conclusion. I will say that's totally fine, but I just, to be able to say we explored it, I think shows goodwill to those that may be approving this project.
I think it's a great selling point if we say we're reusing some equipment. Shows that we've been fiscally responsible.
Is there any further discussion on Mr. Hamilton's motion? All those in favor? Unopposed? Motion carries.
Moving to the next item, I mean, the next big item is the utilities. And, you know, right now, you know, that's a $500,000 guess. Sorry, I'm looking for $100,000 bills. I've suggested that if it costs more than about $90,000 to advance a gas line, that oil would be a better choice. How do we get that number to be something that we have more confidence in? That's a lot of money.
We've had discussions with the town staff, town administrator, about trying to, you know, come up with a better understanding of what the utility extensions would look like. Part of it is with the water lines. The other part is potential for a gas line if we use gas. Gas company, according to town administrator, essentially wants you to sign a contract with them before they'll tell you how much it's going to cost. And they also want you to have your work, potential work, service come online within a year of starting this procedure. Now, that's about as far as I'll go before I turn it over to him to give you more detail on that, because he's the one sort of carrying the water there. But I will say that we do want more specificity on that line item, but we aren't necessarily in charge of all of the variables there, and we do have to rely upon third parties to some extent to give us that. The other piece of information is that those third parties tend to want to design it the way they want it designed. So we may not be able to say, we just want a line going to here, and that's it, no further. They may say, well, if you're going to get service, we need to go to here and do some other things, and that part of that you're going to have to pay. So because we don't know the answer to those things, we haven't been able to put a finer point on that number. And I don't necessarily know when we will have a better understanding on that. I don't know if, Mark, you want to comment?
So so what was said is correct. We do have two applications in with the gas company. One of them is to extend gas from Main Street down to the senior center. The second half would be to extend gas from the senior center to the proposed site for the project. The sticking point is that they will only give us a construction number when we are a year, when they anticipate that there is going to be gas service within a year of when they're giving you the number, because they'll roll excuse me, some of that construction piece I believe, into the number that they're giving you for the gas. So, or into the estimated usage that they're going to be getting from you. So I am focusing on trying to at least get the number for Main Street to the senior center, which it may not be a perfect half, but it's probably closer than not, to give us an idea of what it would be to extend the gas from the senior center to the site.
Might I suggest that we budget for oil, and if gas comes in cheaper, we do gas.
I don't think that's an issue. That's,
Yeah. This is also water, which I've heard some.
I'm getting to water in a minute.
Right, but I think that goes hand in hand, right? The two numbers currently, and Jeff has very accurately put gas on the sheet in front of us, right? Is, if you want to go the oil route, right, that's one option. But did you have a comment on water, or?
Well, I mean,
I don't know that that's been
I want
vetted
to
either.
understand the water situation as well. That one is completely within our control, is it not?
yes.
And what would it cost us? What?
So you're kind of getting out of my pay grade at this point. To have that discussion really should have, I know that there's been discussions with Karen Galligan. I don't know the extent of those discussions that Jeff has had with her. But that could be, and I'm looking at you just to verify, but I think that could be the more expensive of the two. Bringing water to the site is the more expensive of the two than gas.
I agree with that totally. That's my read on the situation. And part of it has to, and the reason we don't have a better number, I think, is that Karen's still doing more work to determine what they ultimately want to do, because if the town is going to take on costs or there is going to be an extension of the water service, the town wants to do it in a way that benefits the town as a whole, not just this particular project. So whether it connects somewhere else and makes a loop or does something else, that's an engineering question that they are, I think, wrestling with.
Well, so let me, I'm going to make a suggestion, what the town does in the street or to facilitate other parts of the town should quite reasonably come out of the water budget.
Absolutely.
What we need to pay for is to connect to the water service in the street or wherever the nearest point is. So I guess what I'd like you to do is to make an estimate of what it would cost for oil, and then if gas comes in, and also let's refine, what we really have to budget for water, and then the last one is electricity, unless I'm missing something. And I'm assuming electricity is more straightforward?
Electricity, we have had preliminary discussions with the supplier that, the power lines are on this side of the street. We asked them whether or not they might be doing any work there in the near future to correct any issues with the lines. Doesn't sound like there was any plans to do anything there, but they do feel like they would most likely have service available for us, so they wouldn't need to necessarily run any additional power to the site. So it'd simply just be an underground connection or a lateral overhead to connect the building to the grid, which would certainly be pretty average. You'll note that at the bottom of this chart, budget chart, there's a line item for utility fees and back charges, and typically this is the connection charges that you would pay. And this seems to keep going up on a yearly basis by $20,000 chunks.
So our real utility budget is $600,000.
Exactly. So what we would consider for a normal project would be about $100,000. The additional cost, what I'm calling the off-site utilities up in the construction number, is to bring the service to the site, and the $100,000 is just to simply connect. So I think that electrical cost is within that $100,000.
Okay.
And depending on whether we go with oil or gas, the oil number would probably be within that $100,000 is my guess as well. If we had a gas line in the street, we probably wouldn't have to include any additional construction off-site, but we don't.
We don't have a gas line in the street.
That's why the number is up above for construction. Typically on depending on the water service, there might be a tap charge. Some towns are able to waive that, depending on how the utility structure is set up. So that would potentially come out of the 100,000 if there was. If there
I know
isn't,
the person
then
the
there wouldn't be.
DPW director works for.
So, again, I think if we can clarify better the water, I think that would go a long way to understanding the offset utilities. And once we understand a little bit better on the gas side, I think, we could firm up that top line number, that $500,000 number, quite a bit. And that would also play into how the bottom line, the $100,000, also what that number is, because that may go down if there's no gas component of that. If it's only electrical and they're setting a transformer for us and a lateral, that may not be 100, it may be 50, so.
Jeff, with the new code, our old building had a 5,000-gallon oil tank. Would that be a above-ground tank or a fiberglass in-ground tank?
I don't have the details. I don't know what we'd be able to do. We're obviously going to go and explore it with the engineers to have a better understanding of what the costs involved. There's also, trade-offs in terms of the energy that you're using and the ability to run. And all the systems would be able to run on oil, but there's not as much power in oil as gas, so you'd be using more
There's more
fuel.
maintenance, more maintenance involved, right?
Yeah. So there's certainly other components that go along with the financial decision to consider it, but those are all the things I think you need to know for the next, to make a decision.
Yeah, when I ran the numbers, if it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, just like when you build a house, if there's gas in the street, it's a no-brainer. But if there isn't gas in the street, you have to weigh the costs, and the numbers don't work if we have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to install a line. It's not a good financial decision.
Yeah, I'll just point out on the water main, obviously, more detail we can get, the better, but it's going to be a sprinklered building, so the size of the main that's going to have to go up to it is certainly not the size that's there now, because I think in talking to the fire chief, I think the closest main is a hydrant at the Woodward Circle. That's not the same size that would have to actually service the building.
Yeah, we got to do the job right.
Right.
I'm not suggesting we not do the job right, but, if it's things that generally improve the service, full disclosure, I am not on town water, so I don't pay this bill.
It's pretty embarrassing to watch our fire station burn down, though.
Yeah, I've seen it happen.
Well, by state law, you can't not put a sprinkler system in this building, so you're paying for it one way or the other, and you certainly don't want to put it on a well system. That would be a lot more expensive.
I'm just suggesting that, let's beef up these numbers, because, that's an important part of the gap between where I'd like to be and where we are today.
Okay. Jeff, of the request that this committee has made of you, is this all doable in advance of next Monday night? You're not going to have a precise number to the dollar. We understand that, but is that a reasonable ask?
I'd say big I don't know, because a lot of it depends on what we can chase down from other parties. I think in terms of knowing sort of relative costs of oil versus gas on site, we'd be able to certainly understand that with our engineers. But without knowing how much it actually costs to run the gas to the site, I think that's a calculation we can't tell you, and that obviously depends on the gas company. We'll do what we can with the town in terms of understanding the cost of the water, but I think part of that also depends on their engineering of that system. We have had discussions with Karen on the size of the line and the flow requirements that would be required for that line. So I think they have some information that they need to know how to deliver service, but we can certainly chase that. Apart from that, I think you've already asked the town staff to look at the traffic signal and the dispatch equipment, and certainly whatever recommendations they come back to us with, we'd be happy to talk to them about and make adjustments to the budget. So if that can happen before next week, certainly be able to do that.
Thank you. So let me ask the committee, if Donovan Sweeney, in conjunction with whoever they need to speak to, come back to us with the best information that they have next week, will this committee be ready to vote on a formal presentation to give to the Board of Selectmen on February 7th?
Yeah, I think we owe them an update, whether it's a recommendation or not. We certainly owe them an update.
Okay. So, what I would suggest is, we already have a meeting scheduled for next Monday night. Obviously, to the extent that you can share anything in advance with the committee to digest, that certainly will help the discussion. I think then, once the committee decides on the exact path forward we're gonna take for the 7th meeting, we can kind of, our goal would be to vote on our slides that night. So the more advance notice we can get, the better, and we can just juggle some numbers if we need to. Does that sound like an appropriate path forward for next week's meeting?
Would it be appropriate to have an interim meeting? And I hesitate to burden you further, but, you know, where you now have the whip in your hand, and, you know, we got a lot of work to do. Would it be appropriate to meet on, say, either Thursday or, I hesitate to say Friday night, but Saturday morning, just to sort of understand where we are in case we need to send any last-minute pleas in Jeff's direction?
My suggestion would be we wouldn't burden Jeff and Ellen with that meeting, because I think the next request is, I would like Jeff to be present for the Board of Selectmen meeting on the 7th, should any of the selectmen have questions that this committee, you know, shouldn't be answering, and a professional should be answering to back up our presentation to them. So if the committee is available, we can certainly think about a meeting time, but I would recommend that the process be Jeff and Ellen send us information, the committee meets and discusses it, and then I will go back with the feedback as discussed by the committee. We can then reassess whether we need a meeting Monday night, depending upon, I'm sure we will need it, in full really discuss and refine, you know, what exactly we'll need to discuss on that meeting.
Let me suggest then that you post a meeting so that we have the option of holding it, because you got there's a 48-hour hour window. It would,
I just need to know people's availability.
well, I guess Thursday night or, no, Saturday morning? No,
I cannot do Thursday.
okay, so Thursday is out. Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon?
Not available.
Yeah, I can do either one.
How's that different from Monday?
In case we wanted to ask Donovan Sweeney to, you know, do any last-minute figuring, or, you know, any feedback, because feedback Monday night is not going to be particularly useful for a Tuesday night presentation.
No, but anything you guys do between now and then is going to affect this list. So sorry, anything that they do between now and Friday or Monday affects our cost estimate here. And it's either higher or lower. I mean, you don't want it to be, but
Yeah, I think
if it firms
everything
up.
we've talked about most likely will make it lower if we change it at all, because I think we've got, trying to be as conservative as possible with the information that we have, so we present realistic facts. If we were able to give you information prior to a Saturday meeting, and you were able to give us feedback, and that feedback was, you know, not necessarily to go back and do more research, because I think in one day that not much we can do, but to modify on a line-by-line basis, maybe a couple of things that you have specific information that needs to be addressed, I don't have a problem with doing that. And, you know, essentially, we're gonna have one day at that point, Monday, prior to the Monday night meeting, to make any changes, so that we're sort of limited in how much we really can do anyways.
I just want to remind the committee, we've also asked them to take on the possibility of this golf course option of moving things around. And there's only so much time, you only have so much you can do, and,
I don't sleep, so that's,
so, I mean,
I'm
I
being.
can't imagine any more, I think that's more important than some teeny-weeny little thing that we might want to call you up and change a number that we've already probably talked about.
Yeah, I think hopefully
I
by
would-
the end of the
I would
week,
focus on the golf course part as
my
kind of the top
intention
priority there.
is by Friday, just as we would do for all of our meetings, is to provide you with materials prior to the meeting on Monday, so that by the end of the day, Friday, you've got whatever we were planning to come with Monday night in an email from us, which includes the budget stuff, which includes the golf course commentary. So I don't necessarily see that as an additional burden. All I'm thinking about is if you're meeting Saturday and you want to give us some additional feedback, we really only have Monday, essentially part of the day, to actually implement that. So there's not much we can change for a Monday night meeting, but at least you'll see it in advance.
Based on the feedback that we have, right, I think a lot of it's going to be understanding the process that was undertaken this week. And I'm not sure that there's any more additional process that they're going to be able to take regardless of whether we meet Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Monday. What I would recommend is we have an Excel spreadsheet handy on Monday night, and I will take ownership of that, to, if we decide that the utility budget needs to be adjusted slightly, we adjust it, we update our presentation, and the committee votes on the path forward for the Board of Selectmen meeting the following night. I think that's the best way forward. Obviously, if your information comes in pieces during the week, I, for one, wouldn't be opposed to multiple emails. So if you have the vetting of the utilities done on Wednesday, send it on Wednesday. You don't have to wait until you have the whole St. Mark's analysis done. I would propose we move forward that way. I think we know what numbers we're talking about at this point. And I think the only discussion that will really be happening on Monday night is, are you comfortable with the process that was taken, and what approach are we taking moving forward? Is everyone? Okay. No, I think if
Can I
scheduled
ask
for, if,
one more question?
go for it.
Allowance for extra services and owner charges.
Changes.
Changes. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. We wouldn't do that, no.
Is there any more questions on the cost estimate? Is there any directives that this committee has that you would like me to seek clarification on from the Board of Selectmen in advance of Tuesday night? Okay. The next somewhat related discussion item is I've been in contact with the advisory chair, indicating that we would like to set up a meeting to do basically the same presentation that we're going to do for the Board of Selectmen. They are meeting tomorrow night, so I would like to propose dates that work for this committee. I think at least if we can get a quorum, that would be helpful, to articulate our case and solicit any feedback that they have. So I don't, obviously it's going to be after the 7th. I don't know if we want to try and do it in the same week, or if we want to look at the next week. You can all look at your calendars, or we can try and set the options now, but I need to let the advisory chair know by tomorrow night. I figured that was the case.
What are the dates?
We are going to provide 3 options, and the advisory committee will let us know what works best for them. But I figured we'd offer dates that work for us, and hopefully that will work for the majority of them and coincide with one of their meetings, because their only, I think, posted meeting is scheduled for tomorrow night. So that obviously is not going to work.
Is Tuesday the regular meeting night?
Yes.
I would suggest we get before advisory sooner rather than later.
Oh, I completely
So I
agree.
would say that the Tuesday after this Tuesday.
They do have another meeting scheduled for the 14th.
Do you know what's on that one?
Valentine's Day.
I don't, because they're shifting some things around, that they're intended items for tomorrow night. They've shifted some things. I talked to Janet Manny today.
Got that email. Wow.
Yeah, right. So one of the things to keep in mind too is the selectmen will be signing the warrant on the 7th for the special town meeting. Hopefully, the selectmen will have all of their recommendations for the articles in by then, and advisory is going to need to have everything in, their recommendations by the 14th, at their meeting on the 14th. So hopefully you can schedule it either for the 14th, or maybe they can do something special for you.
Could we do the 7th, if that's a Tuesday?
Well, we are already on the Board of Selectmen agenda, so we could ask if they would like to join and
Why
not
don't
have
we
to
do
do the
that?
same presentation twice. Or we could, if that does not work, we could then shoot for the 8th or 9th. If you want to, I agree completely that we should just,
If we can do a joint, do a joint. If you can't, do the 8th or 9th.
does anyone have any objections to 8 or 9 if 7 doesn't work? Okay. All right, so I will reach out to the advisory chair and let her know of our preferences.
Why don't you, if you're doing it on the 7th, if you're doing it for the 7th for the selectmen, we could invite advisory.
Well, yeah.
That was what we just,
That's what you just said?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
That's our first preference.
It got a little
but
convoluted, I just, all right.
Thank you for clarifying.
From you, too.
Yeah. All right, so first preference is joint with the selectmen on the 7th. Mark, you'll let us know what, are we first on the agenda or are we somewhere downstream?
No, you're right, square middle at the beginning of the stream. The selectmen will have an executive session at 6, and you are the first item in open session.
Okay, so I will propose to the advisory committee 6:30 on the 7th. If that doesn't work, we'll look at the 8th or 9th.
Yep.
And I will report back as soon as I know. Is there any other discussion that anyone wants to have, or boards that you think we need to have discussions with in advance of special town meeting, other than whatever the selectmen ask of us between now and then?
It might not be a bad idea to meet with the Board of Health, since we're talking about moving a septic system. I know Paul has looked at it. I don't know whether other people have thoughts on that.
Does this committee want me to propose that they come next Monday night?
I think we should, if we do that, we should invite the golf course people, because there was some kind of movement of septic, you know, keep that plan while we have them here.
Oh, we should also invite Rec.
In terms of the Choate Field discussion?
Yeah, and, that is another community whose support we definitely want.
Okay. I will reach out to both chairs for that, and if the 6th does not work, we will coordinate accordingly. Is there any discussion that anyone wants to have on the community outreach planning? I know we had some flyers printed that were distributed at the information session last week. We continue to tweak them as better information becomes available. Does this committee have any discussion of how best to distribute them other than face-to-face meetings at the transfer station and other community events in the next month?
I'd like to put the date of the special town meeting on that. Sorry. I'd like to put the date of the special town meeting on that flyer as well. If anybody else has any changes that they can see to it and have them to me by Monday, we can get those reprinted and get more handed out. And I have no problem standing at the transfer station either for a few hours a Saturday to try to get this done.
Any other thoughts on that?
I still do have that option of the police association mailing that'll go out to everybody in town. So if you get a flyer together that we want to put in the envelopes, we're just waiting on, the committee when would be the appropriate time. Print them up, we'll stuff the envelopes, and we'll get them out.
Do you know what the quantity on your mail list, roughly? 5,000 houses?
I'm not sure. I could tell you tomorrow after I talk to Rick.
If you could, that'd be great.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, do we now have a transfer station plan?
I think we need to come up with a schedule. I don't know if the committee wants to do that tonight, or if you want to go 1 week at a time as schedules change. I'm open to suggestions.
I think we need to be at the transfer station sooner rather than later.
I agree.
We have 4 Saturdays.
Yeah. So my proposal would be we schedule out for this Saturday, next Saturday, to the extent you're available. We can make a sign-in sheet over here, and then go armed with the pamphlets and
The posters.
yeah, and we have the posters too, which we need to be updated for the latest site plan. And the police and fire departments have been doing an excellent job posting the facts as we've been posting them on the town website. Those have been getting out on social media. So as we continue to develop new facts about the projects that we want to educate the taxpayers on, I think we should be looking for avenues along those lines as well, just to make sure that all the right facts are out in the community.
I think that if we could, assuming that Dunham is able to make some twists and turns to the building and integrate the golf course modifications and can get that to us quickly, I think, having an updated site plan with that stuff in it would
Let me
be
raise my hand a minute
really
ago.
important. I'm sorry, yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Pete, I stole your thunder.
I didn't know if you were gonna eyeball the project, and I didn't know if that would include a drawing.
Not for
Similar
next
to-
week. Certainly
I'd
not.
like to get that on the plan
Not,
that we're
not,
handing out to everybody.
not unless I actually don't sleep.
Oh, you said you didn't need sleep.
No, that would be,
Just
I
cut and
think,
paste his drawing on there.
I think premature just because I think we owe you more due diligence than that. I'm particularly talking about drainage and the infiltration basins and just having everything factored in so that we don't sort of build a nice dream and then pull the rug out from under you when we actually figure out, oh, wait, we did actually need that drainage, which wipes out 20 parking spots, and now we've got to find parking in the middle of the 9th green somewhere. So, I don't want to sell something that isn't realistic yet. So I think the first step is for us to provide some commentary, and then based upon that, we
Okay.
can move forward.
I guess we obviously had a information session last Thursday night, which was recorded. The library had tentatively scheduled us to do it again on March 2nd. So I guess some feedback from the committee would be, one, do we think it would be valuable to do a repeat of that discussion? And as a follow-up to that, is the library venue going to be big enough if we were to do that, given the general proximity to the special town meeting? We were about at max capacity the other night. There were no seats, right, and a lot of people standing on the side. So I'll just open it up for feedback on that in terms of do it again and the forum for that.
I think we should do it again. And where would be a venue big enough that you think would work?
Think you may either looking at school space or you're looking at the senior center, wide, all the walls down.
The advantage of the library is that they do a really good job of bringing people in.
Oh, absolutely.
And, you got to go where your customers are.
Mm-hmm.
You could do two. If it's overflow crowd, that's not a bad thing.
Any other thoughts from the committee?
I think we should do the second one because we're gonna have all new information.
Okay.
There's been a lot of changes and we need to share those.
Thoughts on venue? I completely agree with Mr. Hamilton's comment about the library in the
Yeah.
audience, but
do
I
too.
do think there will be more interest in the next one because we will have final plans. It's going to be basically a preview of the town meeting presentation.
If it's an overflow, they can always come to our meeting afterwards.
Yeah.
Like Al said, we can always have two.
Yeah, you might want to consider doing a school and, using the school packet as an announcement vehicle. Is it a Wednesday packet? It's been a long time since I've had kids in the school.
Thursday.
Thursday, okay.
All right, so I will reach out and try to get availability for that. I do know we have, sorry, did you have
No,
something?
go ahead.
I do know I am out of town the week before the special town meeting. I know the fire chief, I believe, is out of town roughly the same time, and I do think having the chiefs present to answer questions. We didn't get any questions the other night on your operations, but I do think coming from the chiefs themselves, if that does come up, is important. So we do have some scheduling to work around, but I guess we can coordinate and see if the school's available, and then I'll reach back out to the committee with possible dates.
So just one thing. I mean, I think the library would be a good site. I thought it worked out well. You know, there was a number of people. You know, it's nice to have a good full room. I think you will have a full room. I do think that, you know, you should take that opportunity, as I said, as a dry run for town meeting, and kind of set things up and work it the way that you want to. I think that Mr. Rooney will be the spokesman for the selectmen on this issue, so that you can continue to work on your interplay. I do think that, you know, obviously at 102 slides, that's not going to cut it. I think one of the things that I noticed from the presentation is that, you know, and no disrespect to the chief or his facility, but the pictures do not portray what you're trying to portray. They just don't. And part of the issue, and somebody brought it to me afterwards, is that, you know, for the police presentation, you had Southborough on the left, and you had the newer facility on the right, and then for the fire presentation, it was flopped, you know, so it was switched. And so people may think, well, I'm looking at Southborough Fire, and that looks fine to me. But I think that you need to, and for presentation purposes, you need to almost prepare 2 presentations, because if you get town meeting with, say, the normal 180, 200 people and everything in that, that'll be one type of presentation. I think that's more of the longer presentation and a little bit more of those things. If you get the Main Street crowd that came out for the last town meeting and you get 600 plus people, they're coming in knowing what they want to do, and they're not going to sit through a 50-minute presentation, and you may out-present yourself, you know, and so you'll need to think about that, and it'll be something that you may have to do, you know, on the fly.
Yeah, I think I've had conversations with both chiefs, and I think we've all agreed that the slides that were in the presentation last week for the building conditions, there will be maybe 2 or 3 max for each, you know, highlighting the major troublesome areas, and obviously it's going to be a streamlined presentation unless the town meeting calls for
I
something
think it's
different.
more visual, especially with the police station is you know, the problem child in the group. Yeah, focus on the exterior. Focus on some of those pieces. A lot of those pieces speak for itself. So anyway, we can, you know, the committee can shift some of those things, but, you know, I just wanted to offer those comments.
Thank you. All right, so I have another to-do to report back on availability of school and or library space, depending upon what's available. Is there any other business that this committee would like to undertake tonight? Thank you for the reminder.
Approve minutes.
Bunch of minutes.
So,
I just have those changes, Mike sent.
so which minutes are you proposing we approve?
It was
There was 5 of them.
Yeah, so 126 was the information session.
Yep.
I think you had changes to those.
Yep.
So we'll get a new one. 121 was the information session at the police station
Yep.
and fire station.
yeah, that's
It was simple.
simple.
That was a one-liner.
So all members is there a motion to approve the minutes from 121, which was the information session conducted for the public at the police and fire stations? Second, all in favor? And then the meeting on 118, which I believe was the presentation to the Board of Selectmen. Was there any proposed changes to those?
No.
All right. Second, all in favor? Okay. Any other business? Is there a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor? Thank you.